We've got 63 slides. We've got 2 experts. Our institutional knowledge here is really deep. Dennis Dearly has been a diesel mechanic on every kind of diesel you can think of. For 15 years he was an expert. He's still an expert. He keeps us going. He's my assistant rear commodore for large boats, and he helps us solve diesel problems every month. And also, I'm lucky enough to have my assistant rear commodore for medium boats. Jeff Warner is an electronics engineer. We have done some custom fabrication of Jeff's design. So we have tremendous institutional intelligence available to us, and that's what this class is all about. Let's take advantage of the expertise that we have in the club. And we have Preben Klug, Preben Klug's right here. He is the one who helped me put all this together. He's very knowledgeable. He helps people fix everything. He's the assistant rear commodore on Wojo. And so the expertise are these 3 gentlemen. Okay, if you have questions afterwards when we get to that point. I have an ulterior motive. I need good boat chiefs and good assistant boat chiefs, and we need to avoid blowing up engines. Right? So the more you know, the better off the whole club is. The more money we save, the less damage we have. So Dennis and Jeff are going to speak to these 3 slides, these 63 slides. And then Preben will point out artifacts here. We have several artifacts that you can ask questions about. All right, so we're going to start off with Dennis. We've got slides, but please leave all your questions to the end. We have a Q&A session for at least 15, 20 minutes afterwards. So why don't you come ahead and we'll start the slides, and no questions.
There you go.
We're going to try to we'll do the mechanical systems first. We'll do the electrical systems, then drivetrain, and then troubleshooting session.
Dennis, sorry. Can people hear at the back?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Can you turn up the volume a little?
Yeah.
Pretend you're shouting at somebody.
Yeah.
Take your hat.
Okay. In case you haven't figured it out, the engine that makes all the noise is down in the center of the boat. I don't know. We don't know who knows what here yet, but diesel engines. Go ahead. Yeah, next one. Okay, this kind of gives you an idea of what we have down in the middle of the boat. And just to preface all the diesel and stuff, a diesel engine is nothing more than an oversized gas engine. I mean, they were both introduced to the society and everything else at about the same time, first part of the last part of the 18th century. The diesel is about twice or more of the weight and the structure of a gas engine. They all have essentially the same parts in the basic engine. They have the block itself, the block itself, which is much heavier built than everything else. The fuel systems are what really show the difference between a diesel and a gas, and the way the pistons are built, all this kind of stuff, because diesel takes about twice as much pressure inside the engine itself to run. gas engine, of course, it has spark plugs in it, as you all know, and a distributor and all that, and that's what ignites the gasoline. However, a diesel engine was made by increasing the pressure in the combustion chamber by changing design of the pistons, the design of the heads, and so on. But it has no igniters or anything like that to ignite the diesel fuel. Diesel fuel has more BTUs per pound than the gasoline.
What's BTU?
British thermal units. It's what heat, how much heat it's got. A diesel will, these engines here that we're showing you, and the reason we got them marked off is because those are some that do not exist anymore in our fleet. But we've used Universal, Mitsubishi, and Westerbeek, and Yanmar. Universal and Westerbeek are most of the diesels in the fleet. Now, you've probably never heard of either one of those, and it's because they're built mostly for small applications, tractors, and stuff like that. However, they're built off another design, another manufacturer of diesel engines. What they do is they take this small diesel engine, which is a Kubota, and strip most of the regular stuff off, because they use them in tractors, they use them in small generators, they use them in a lot of things. But in this application, they are selling them to boats. Well, not too many tractors have external coolers and stuff like this, so that's what they did. I don't know the business of it all, but some way they got Kubota to sell them an engine, a basic engine, and they put all the accessories on it, you might say. Put the water manifolds, the different pans so it can fit, the alternators, all the stuff that's outside the engine itself. But it's still a Kubota engine.
Down here.
Yeah.
Still a Kubota engine, yeah. We strip off the top and put on our marine heat
Yeah.
exchangers and spin it
And Kubota does not like to admit that. Before they moved Kubota out of Oxnard here, I used to go down there and get parts. But I found out real quick that you don't walk in and say, I need a Westerbeek water pump. You know, and they say, so? You know? So, just to give you an idea, and we always say marine cost a lot. Well, it does. Any parts for them cost a bunch. I went down there once to get a water pump. I'd already talked to Westerbeek down in Los Angeles, and they wanted $180 for a water pump. So I went out to Kubota with the pump, set it on the desk, and he said, I think maybe I got a couple of those. So I let him go back to the back, he messed around, brought one back, identical. I said, what's this thing worth? And he looked it up, he said, $32. So there's a lot of write-up on this stuff. Just a minute.
Next slide.
Mitsubishi was one that we had to put in quite a while ago. It's a good engine, there's no doubt about it. But
Little Zephyr now, right?
yeah, it's on Little Zephyr. And then we go to the Yanmars, which are Japanese engines, and they're mostly in the big fleet. We have them in Oito,
Charm and Mistral have
Yeah.
this one, and Lozo and Big Z have this one.
yeah. It's a good engine, and it's been made more for marine than than Universal or the other ones. It's made in Japan, and it's got a Japanese transmission and everything else, but Beta, the last one on there, is a company that started up the same way that Universal and Westerbeek did. They're on the East Coast, and they build some of the accessories they put on there are a lot better. Of course, a lot of the engines we have also are, as you can see, they're not new. They're not new engines, but they run good as long as you help them out. Let's go ahead and change.
Okay, so we'll talk about Beta Marine.
Yeah, well, the M25XP, this is
The
Sorella,
Beta Marine.
this is Sorella, this is Islandside right now, that's what's over there, the 25XP. And Mark III, that's Mark III's 25XP, you couldn't get those anymore, we figured out, we figured out that the gas, that moved Beta Marine to Mark III. Took a while, but it's in there, running great. That's what's in our fleet right now.
Okay, this gives you a good look at how the engine is. As you look down in the engine compartment, you're going to see the Raycor filter somewhere in between there and the fuel tank. We're going to see that later.
The Raycor will separate water from the fuel. The water will accumulate. Water is heavier than diesel. Water will go to the bottom. Diesel will float on top. And when you inspect these things, you'll be able to see that if you've got water in here, or if you've got dirt and crap coming out of your tank in here on the bottom, we can bleed out the water. The water and the dirt until you get pure fuel. This part is actually a filter.
Yeah.
Okay, it does separate the water. It's a filter. You get them in different micron separation. This is a 2 micron. That's really fine. Most of them are 10. Most of them are 10, maybe 5. But two anyway. So it's a combination filter separator. But this is the first filter separator we have right off the gas tank. And then keep on going because there's another one on the engine.
Yeah, real.
Let me just say one thing. When you look at it in the boat, you need a strong flashlight because it's down in a dark spot, the area, and it's very hard to see because of this yellow. There's nothing in it right now, so you can see very clear. But when it's down in the boat, you need a bright light to see if there's any dirt in it or water.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
goes into the village, right? That's all
Yeah.
stuff in the village.
It depends, but some of them have it underneath the bed, on the bigger boats, on the 38 footers, underneath the stern bed. Some of them have between the transmission and that area.
We try to locate them with a strainer, so that when you do your flashlight, you're checking this for raw water, and you're checking this for water separation. So we try to put them together.
Fuel line from the fuel tank first goes into that Raycor, by the way.
Right,
So
yeah.
fuel tank, Raycor first.
And then the fuel filter's here.
Also should have, Raycor also should be at least 12 to 20 micron. Does not need to be 2.
Yeah.
2 micron is what is on the engine, right before the fuel pump.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. 2.
Yeah. Here's the fuel pump right here, high pressure fuel pump. And there is a filter on it.
These 3 steel hoses, and the reason they're steel is that it's high pressure, and the high pressure comes from the fuel pump, which is here at this end, and then these attach to the injectors, injector, and then down here, glow plug, glow plug, glow plug. So they're kind of together here, but this is very high pressure because the fuel has to be misted in exactly the right ratio of air to fuel. High pressure makes it a real mist that will explode under compression.
Then it's supposed to PSI in that, out of that fuel injector pump. How much pressure?
About 2100.
Over 2,000 PSI. Yeah.
It's very high
That's
pressure.
what it is, yeah.
Anyway, what he's saying in your high pressure pump, these are those high pressure lines that go to the injectors.
2,000, yeah.
And the
The glow plugs
injectors,
are just to keep
we'll
this.
have the injector will come up here in a minute. We can look at it too. that's pretty well the fuel system. And like I said, if you have it, this is here mainly, the Raycor's there mainly for water. But the filtration system is there too.
Come out of the fuel tank, yeah.
Like I said, we need to have like 12 to 20 micron up here, not 2. The other filter is right before here, and that needs to be 2.
Where's that filter? The one out in the engine.
Looks like an oil filter, but it's not.
Yeah.
And it goes in a different location on the engine. So that you'll see it, it's labeled fuel filter when you get over here. Okay.
Anyway, that's more or less where your fuel system goes. It goes from there to here to here to the injectors. After the injectors also have a second line right here that jumps from one to the other. That is for this one, and then it goes back to the tank. Now, why are we pushing that fuel up there when we're going to do that? Because
This is fuel out to the separator, to the Raycor. This is excess fuel return. So when the engine has excess fuel and it collects it, this is how it goes back to the tank. This is the fill that comes from the deck fill line, and this is the external vent. So as you put fuel in, air goes out. It's got to go out here, right? So this is loading fuel into the tank. This is sending fuel to the engine. This is returning fuel back from the engine. And this is the sender. The sender, this is a ground lug. The sender is the thing that tells you how much is in there. This rotates up, full tank. This resistor reads a certain number of ohms. As your fuel goes down, the ohms change and your fuel gauge changes. So that's all this is. These are built of different lengths, but this is where it goes into the tank, sits there, and then this is what sends, you got a grounding lug here, and then the reading of the resistance, the ohms, back to the meter from here. So this is just here so this is where it starts. And then it fits in here. Somehow. Yeah. Anyway, senders often go bad. We just replaced a fuel filter on Sorella, and we've replaced several senders too. So when you're troubleshooting, you want to start where logically it would start.
Fuel senders are moving part, all moving parts of what wear.
Yeah. Stuff breaks. Okay.
okay, that pretty well gives you a short shot at the fuel system. We'll talk more specifically on the injectors and so on in a little bit. But, that's where it really comes into, like we said, you don't mess with these nuts on here.
Not the high pressure line.
Not the high pressure lines, and definitely don't try to tighten them.
Could you talk a little bit about bug juice? How important is this?
Oh, it's important. But
Fuel conditioner.
the fuel conditioner we have on all the boats, and it needs to
So
be kept up
most
high.
diesel engines in a pickup truck have a DST additive,
The new ones,
huh?
the new ones.
So bug juice is because bugs actually love diesel fuel, and they will live in there if you don't kill them with this. So you put a couple ounces of diesel fuel in first before you fuel the tank. That washes all the bug juice down into the tank where it kills the bugs. And if you don't kill the bugs, you'll end up with clogs all over the place.
Actually,
Bug juice is important.
that phenomena there with that, there's two things you do it, and obviously I drive a diesel, so but these bugs that he calls them, what they do is they live. When you let a tank set, any kind of tank, if it's got water and diesel in it, or water and gasoline even, the water will drop below the gasoline and the diesel. And there'll be a layer inside the tank. Now this is obviously when you're not running because there's agitation when you're running. And they live in the water and they eat the diesel. So, but they will turn into a scum, I guess is the best thing of putting it, and it will go through your Raycor filter and so on. So what you want to do is you want to kill them and get rid of them. Well, you use a conditioner like that, which will kill the bugs and make them so that they'll go through the system pretty well. The other problem you have is water in the tank, and one thing that can help you there, obviously Raycor is going to take out as much as it can, and it's pretty efficient, but the more you have in there, the more less time your Raycor has. What I do in my diesels are I put in a additive called heat, H-E-A-T, which I put in these too when I'm doing changing oil filters. Heat is a liquid that has isopropyl alcohol in it. And isopropyl alcohol will absorb water. And the other good thing it'll do, it will allow, when it absorbs it, then it will go into the stream and it can go into the fuel system without any problem and actually go through and be combusted and gone. So that's a deal if you have a diesel that every once in a while you want to fill up the tank and you put it's about the same size as that bottle over there. Put it in there and it keeps it clean. Water, when it hits these injectors, if it's pure water and everything's trying to run, it will blow the tip off the injectors because it's trying to turn to steam at 220 degrees. Where the fuel that's going in there it's got to have like 750 degrees. So it'll take it, and the tip of a injector, we'll go through that in a minute, is very small, so they can give you this spray. So they can blow the tip off your injectors if you let water continue. Another system, of course, is your raw water system. There's your valve for your raw water. There's your strainer. Goes from there, goes to a raw water pump. But now this system here is the one that actually does the cooling. It goes from there, it goes into the coolant reservoir, which is also a heat exchanger. So it takes the heat from the engine. These engines they have an internal cooling system like any car or anything.
Antifreeze, fresh water, yep.
That's all in the engine, and it goes to that, which is here, and one half of that takes the seawater and cools the fresh water or the engine water and sends the engine water back. So there's your radiator.
So fresh water is the large orifices, comes and goes through the engine. Salt water are the small ones, and the zinc, engine zinc, is in the end of this plug. So when you want to know where the engine zinc is, it's right there. So that's a sacrificial metal that the salt water will deteriorate over time instead of deteriorating the heat exchanger. So this is a heat exchanger which goes on the bell housing. So where you're going to find it is the bell housing at the back of the engine above the transmission. So this is where it sits, and these hoses, cold water, fresh water goes in here, out here, and salt water goes in here and out here. So
Can you show that on the diagram one more time? There we are.
if you can, if you look at the end of this, we'll take this off. You can see that there's different chambers in there. And raw water, no, you can't see it, but different chambers in there that, but you can see it later. We'll leave it open.
I don't know whether there's a slide on that or not. I'm not sure whether there's a slide on
Why
that.
don't you go with what you're doing
Yeah.
here, so we.
But anyway, it goes through the heat exchanger, it goes in here, and then it goes to the exhaust. This is the exhaust. And it dumps all that water into the exhaust, and it puts it in here for the reason that the piping from here to the exit of the region.
See this hose here? This is the exhaust, out of the exhaust manifold. And this is where the raw water goes into the exhaust. So you'll see a little nipple on top of the exhaust pipe. That's what it's for, raw water.
Don't touch it.
Anyway, the important part you need to know about the water system, this water system, is this pump right here. It's not a positive displacement pump, however, it's pretty close.
See, some of these pumps, like on some of the pumps, like on this one, this is forward. So it's very easy to replace the impeller. Some is sitting here, some get worn. Some of the engines, instead of sitting like that, it's turned around and it's down low and it's very hard.
Yeah.
So if you're lucky and you have to replace it and you're lucky forward, good for you, otherwise it's a big job. But this impeller is made of rubber. And I don't know if you can see, when I turn it, you can see how the rubber is bending.
Yeah.
So you keep doing that enough times, before or later that rubber will start to crack. When it cracks, after a while it will come apart and it will be blown through the hose and it will get stuck
In the heat exchanger. So when your water circulation isn't right, there's a piece of the impeller in here that's impeding the water circulation. So you'll find that piece that comes off the impeller in the heat exchanger.
Now, if you're lucky, and you have, let's say you have to replace it, you're out on a cruise, and you have to replace it. First thing to look for is, when you take it out, how many weights was supposed to be here. You count and see if you have the broken ones, if you can reach them and get them. If you can't get them, and let's say half of them is gone, then you definitely have to wait and pull them out at the heat exchanger. If one is missing and you are out cruising, you might say, wait a minute, I'm not going to take it apart because maybe it leaks by the time I put it back together. Then you start up the engine and you see if you can keep it cool. If you can keep it cool, then you can be okay. And you can replace it when you get home. But if too many of them are missing, you have to take the cover off. Same thing here. On this one, it's a paper gasket. I had one apart the other day, and I said, what the heck is the paper gasket? Well, there was an O-ring instead, and it was dirty, so you could barely see it. So some of them will have a paper gasket, some will have an O-ring. So if you have to replace it, you may be out of luck, and you don't have a gasket. It should be on the boat, gasket or O-ring. But if it's not there, be very careful. When you take all the screws off, try to move it a little and take it off and see if you can get it off without damaging the gasket. If it's an O-ring, you probably have no problems getting it apart.
So the sign would be high temp that would cause.
Yes.
So that's what we would
Well,
see.
that's
Yeah.
one, but the other thing that you've been taught ever since you've been in this club is check the water coming out of the exhaust.
Yeah.
If there's no water coming out of the exhaust, you've got either this is blocked, this is shot, this is blocked, or that's blocked.
And the engine will sound a little funny. Like
No, not really. Well,
The engine won't affect the engine at all, it's running fine.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with the engine spinning.
until it gets,
It only affects cooling,
yeah.
the coolant.
So when it
The
gets
engine
too
can't get
hot,
hot.
Dennis, let's continue with
then
what you're
it will
doing here.
damage the engine. Then it gets too hot to
I
blow.
know.
Yeah, don't burn up an engine, please.
Let's continue with
go
your
ahead and go.
presentation, Dennis. Okay.
Okay, this is, what do you, understand, it's just some information. Diesel engine operates by injecting fuel into the high temperature air environment. That environment, as you can see, is anywhere from the temperature's got to be up to close to 700, 750, and the pressure's got to be up close to 800 plus. Right in here, it fires real good. And as it says there, the typical compression ratio is between 17:1 and 21:1. A regular gas engine is from 9 to 10.5 usually. That's why the cylinders have to be built better, the block has to be built better, all that. It goes on to tell you that the glow plugs are used on most diesels to go ahead and artificially increase the temperature, because if they don't have it, they got to get it from the compression. And your rings get bad, and pretty soon, unless you can really spin that engine, it's not going to start. Okay, go to the next one.
So the glow plugs get to 750 when you switch it on, and you ignite it, so it's 750?
No, that's what it needs. Yeah, hopefully, but it won't. That's brand new.
Glow plugs just help warm, especially when the engine's cold. That's all. Just helps speed up.
No, he was asking about the,
Temperature of the glow plug when you switch it
yeah,
on.
yeah. The temperature of the glow plug, is just a resistive wire, you might say, and so, but that's why they tell you to leave it on 10 seconds, I believe. Yeah.
Just to help start a cold engine.
So the glow plug gets it to what temperature? 500, 700?
No, it just warms it up. It allows then for the piston to go ahead and achieve that 750.
Oh, okay.
See, that's what it's for now. There's,
And you don't have to have glow plugs to start all engines. A lot of the Yanmars don't have glow plugs, for example.
right.
Let's keep your questions down
Yeah.
so we can keep moving.
I know. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, here's the engine pressures. You can see this is as you roll the engine before it starts, it's building this curve. You get up to about there, and that's about all it can do. 500, which is plenty to go ahead and heat it big enough to fire. And that's what it's saying here. The cylinder pressure will bleed off as you slow, or your starter slows up. Fast cranking will give you a little better kick on it. Just to say something about, there's a couple of the engines that have compression releases. I don't know whether you know what a compression release is, but it's a device or a set of, it's a rod that they install in the overhead valve cover.
Right here.
And
As I push this forward, it's lifting.
what it does is it goes over the valves and it pushes them down about that much. That allows all the gas that you wanted to compress to go back. It just sits there like a machine. You won't get any compression, but what it does is it allows you, the starter, maybe the starter's bad, maybe the batteries are bad. They don't turn it fast enough to start it. But you can take that, if you learn how to use it, and hold it, have somebody spin the engine and let it go once it gets up to that RPM, and it'll start the engine.
There's some older engines that don't have this, right?
No, a lot of them have it. Yeah. Even the old ones have it. Some of them.
A lot of newer engines don't have it.
Okay, go ahead.
This is an old one.
Okay, injectors, fuel system again. Like I said, goes to the pump. Now, some of these pumps have the hand lever on them and some don't. I tried to, on all the Yanmars, which are a little more convenient to get to than some of the others, I painted this red so you can see that handle on it. It's on the starboard side and it's not easy to see. But anyway, it goes from there. It's a ray core, goes to the pump, then it goes to each one of the injectors, and these are bleed offs. And as I said before, The reason we have bleed offs is because you always want more fuel at the injector than you need, because you don't want any way that air can get in here if you can keep from it. And so they build the pumps and everything else to put out a lot more of the fuel through there than it needs. It does two things. It keeps you getting air in, and it cools the injectors. There are certain ones that don't use that from other manufacturers. All of these have that bleed off. Oh. Okay. Just to give you an idea of what some of these, the internals of this engine look like. This is explained, the combustion chamber they're trying to show you is not the same on all engines. This particular type is what we call an open combustion chamber. That means the injector is going straight in, it's going straight into the piston, blows up and away you go. It's a pre-combustion chamber. It has a pre-combustion chamber here, the fuel goes in, it actually starts burning here and burns out through there to push the piston. Swirl combustion. This is the type that we have on the universals. It actually has a pre-combustion chamber over here, and it goes in and pushes it down. Air cell, that's one that just shoots it straight across. But there's as you can see, there's various types of systems that they use. The injectors, this has a good breakdown of a cutaway, but what it boils down to is this: when you shoot this fuel through here, right here, all of this is the injector. Inside the injector is a check valve, you might call it, a spring up here. And in order to make this thing, we call it pop, it's got to come out of a very small hole, right down here. And some go out, some go down. But what it does is the pressure pump starts building up pressure, and it acts on this part of the internal injector. What it does is when it gets up to its pop pressure, which should be somewhere between 18 and 2,100 pounds, it will lift it, and that's what shoots the fuel out. And wherever that pump is set, the pump regulates how much fuel is going to go in there. This regulates when it goes in there. So it's not a valve, it's not anything else. It acts strictly off of pressure. You don't want to put your finger there, unless you don't want the end of your finger. So don't pull these things out and test them. Okay. All right.
Hey Dennis, real quick, could you just touch on injector timing? I'm assuming that relates to the timing of injectors when they release and how that affects how the engine runs.
Well,
For multi-cylinder engine? Yeah.
total duration and the amount of fuel and so on are regulated by the pump and the injector, you might say. But the injector is a slave to the pump. If the injector gets more worn, it will release fuel sooner. If the pump gets worn, it will not get the fuel there it should. It's got to go harder to get you to run faster. So, like I said, it's all a pressure thing completely. Okay, here we're going to look at some pre-start engine checks that you need to have, which everybody does, I'm sure. I hope. But you want to check your coolant. Reservoir is at a proper level. This is up on the wall. And what we have is an overflow tank. So it's just like in your car. You look on it, see where the level is. This goes to a cap, which is a pressure cap. You've seen those and all that kind of stuff. Raw water valve, you want to make sure it's open. Raw water strainer, you want to check it. Raw Raycor, you want to check it to be clear. That's a picture of it. Oil level within limits, but do not, be careful, some low water marks are add, but some are empty. What you want to look at, we went back and forth, and so we kind of try to condense all of these into one style of doing it, or whatever you want to call it. But there's always either a dot or a line on the upper part of the stick that goes in there and the lower part of it. And whether it's a dot or whatever on the bottom end, you don't go below that, period. And the line or dot that's on the upper part is full. That's it. We need to keep it at full as we can. Going over full is not a good idea. Going a lot over full is why that engine.
All the manuals say it's over full to remove oil. Don't ever run over full. All the manuals.
Right. So.
Dennis, I might just add a little tip here. On Bordeaux, so we have our third engine for I've found that many times when you check the dipstick, pull it out,
Oh yeah.
it will show it's completely almost out of oil. Don't go ahead and fill up oil because you think it's out of oil. Check it at least twice or 3 times before you decide how much oil is in. Because many times the first time you pull it up, it will show hardly any oil at all. If you do second or third time, you will find out what the real oil level is. I have never seen that happen on anything else, not on any cars or anything, but for some reason Bordeaux is like that.
Well, it'll do it on the rest of them too. And the reason is because you got that rubber grommet looking thing that's on the dipsticks. And so they will go, when you put them in, or somebody did or whatever, it'll actually seal, and now it's still got that far to go. And it'll push the oil out of the tube. And so tomorrow or the next day somebody goes in there, that's air down there. The oil is actually higher than that, and it's around that tube. So you pull it out, it's empty. And you start pumping some in. But always check it at least twice, maybe 3 times if you've got a question.
Most of those have a little oil seal, so when you put the dipstick in, it seals it.
Okay, but what's the one that's misread that?
All of them.
All of them can do that.
Yeah.
All of them can do that.
Yeah, you can do it with all of them.
The rule is do it more than once, that's all. But I want to add that on the on mark, particularly on charm, her bottom mark is not add, it's empty.
No,
She doesn't have
it's
to
not empty, obviously. but-
No, it's empty. I measured it. It said 0.7 quarts left when it's at the bottom mark. 0.7 out of 2.6. Her manual says it's empty.
Well, the other thing you got to look at too is that engine's not level, and that's what the manual talks about.
Yeah.
That engine's at a 15-degree angle approximately, and so you got oil down at the bottom.
Don't let them go.
Don't.
And the manual says keep them full. So.
Yeah.
Now Angel C has an add mark. She does.
Yeah.
They're different. is all.
Yeah, that's why only use your judgment or whatever. The lowest mark is empty, or it's too low, and the upper mark is full. Period. Don't go over full. Don't go under empty. Always try to keep them up. You know, you get on the boat, go ahead and get them up close to full or full. That's another thing that I've seen here lately. We should be using a 15 W40 oil, and I see that some of them aren't using that. You should always have oil on the boat. You should have oil on the boat. You should have filters on the boat. You should have an impeller on the boat. Okay, the battery voltage should be about 12.6 when you look at it on your gauge. Engine with glow plugs and lift pumps, ignition switches, spring loaded. Start position that turns both of these on. Glow plug to help start the engine. Lift pump to get fuel to the fuel. Mechanical pump on the AM arms are pretty good.
Yeah.
So
They don't have a separate electric lift pump.
right, you don't have electric. Okay. While engine's running, never turn off the ignition while the engine is running. This can lead to blown diodes in the alternator, requiring repair or resistance, and also disables all engine alarms. Always stop the engine first before turning the ignition key off or turning Perco off.
So there's a cable here that all it does is stop the engine.
And what it's stopping is the fuel.
Full stops the engine. It says stop right on the engine. And all it does is eliminate fuel.
It just stops fuel completely.
Stops the fuel,
Yep.
stops the engine.
The only way to stop the diesel is stop the fuel.
Yeah.
Mark III Beta engine has a push button to stop the engine,
Yeah.
by the way. She's the only one I know of. And if that doesn't work, there is a manual lever below you can pull. It does fit these two. And it's marked. It's marked. Yeah. Mark III has a new beta.
Yes, and new engine.
Okay, and the next one has to do with the engine temperature. Normal running temperature is about 150 to 170. You know, that's a good set of temperatures, but probably none of them will be the same because of the age of the boats. We've probably changed them a couple of times, so you never know what condition that's in. But as long as it keeps it below 170, you're still all right. As it says, don't let it go past 190. You get it between 170 and starts rising up into 180, 185. You better start looking around. And look for water coming out of your exhaust first. You get into a situation, you don't have any water coming out of the exhaust or very little, or it's starting to steam real bad out of the back end. You might have something in your impeller or in your cooler. And you can also check your strainer, obviously, coming in.
And water coming out of the exhaust is kind of a spit, right?
Well, no, not really. Well,
because of the way the aqua
It has a spitting, so the
That's
exhaust
what
is
I
spitting.
meant by the engine sounds funny. It's not the engine, but there's a funny noise on the boat. You can tell. There's something different
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, it's like it's spitting water.
A real quick point on Z and probably Wojo too, the operating temperature is more like 180 degrees.
Yeah. That's it. I think we've got it on there, don't we?
Yeah.
It's written on there. Yeah, it's a little higher, but that's all right.
Most of the boats have the label on it to say don't operate above a certain
Yeah.
temperature. So it might not be 170, it might be 180.
Here's the maintenance checklist. It talks about check the operation of all your through valves, check battery connections for tightness, add distilled water. Some of the boats now don't have lead acid batteries, so
Well,
if
that's
it doesn't have a screw place on the top of the cap, don't make one. Okay. Check the oil, transmission fluid, and coolant. When you check the transmission and you can't find anything in there, don't just grab a quart and shove it in there, because it only holds about a pint full. So check the engine zinc. That's a monthly we do on them, stuff like that. Engine zincs you can get over at the marine place. Inspect seawater inlet screen and fuel separators. We went over that. Check fuel level. Contact your last user if it's below half. Then your quarterlies, you check the valves again, check the drive shaft packing gland for proper leakage. We're going to go over that. Inspect the engine for the head and gallery hoses for leaks. Leaks anywhere. Inspect coolant level in expansion bottle. We went over that. What's that? Oh,
This
that's
is
the
the
book.
manual.
That's the manual.
This is what tells you. Jeff was telling me the other day, some of our boats, the oil you put in the engine, same oil you put in the transmission.
Yep.
Beyond Mars.
And Mars.
Yeah,
All
not
the-
transmission
Only
fluid,
beyond Mars, I think.
regular engine oil
Yeah.
in the transmission. So this is the Bible. This tells you how to take care of your engine. And you put this on a spreadsheet, Like Jeff has done, you know exactly how many engine hours before you service the engine. This is the Bible.
Quarterlies, they do about the same thing. Also on that, the Yanmars anyway have a tag on there that tells you what kind of oil to use on it. So, and the quarterlies, they're pretty well the same as these checks because they're monthlies. You do the zincs, you do the fuel filters, check the fuel filters. Now we've had a couple of instances in the last year or two where the fuel filters get plugged up. Well, number one, I don't know what the racehorse filter is, but it should be the fuel filter on the engine should probably get plugged up before the racehorse. But what I do with the boats I'm on and so on is I change the fuel filter when I do the engine oil. You may as well. You're there. You're already got grease all over you and everything else. It only costs what, $5-10 for that filter.
You just had an incident on Sorella, right? Mark's here somewhere. Just had an incident. He changed this. I mean, he could not get above 1,400 RPM.
Yeah.
He changed this. Be sure and pour oil,
Diesel.
diesel in here before you put it on the engine, so you're not introducing air. If you don't pour fuel in here first, before you put it in here, you're just putting air into your system.
have to bleed all
You're going to bleed a long
Yeah,
time.
bleed it all out, and then he hits 2,500 RPM as soon as you change the fuel. Those bugs living at the bottom of your tank, they're over here.
They found out all the wrong things, the things I was doing wrong.
Okay.
So how do you check the fuel filter? So you swap it out?
Yeah,
There's no
yeah.
way to check it.
No.
It's a canister that you can't really open.
Yeah, it's just a screw-on filter. But it's supposed to be changed every 150 or so hours. The oil filter is supposed to be changed at 100 hours or something. And we found that it depends. Now, most of your smaller boats and stuff, mid-size, if you can stick to that, you're probably pretty good. The big ones, I've run up about 200 hours before I do the oil and filter, because somebody can give me 50 hours in a week or two, you know? And so as long as they're running, it's like anything else. If you keep a piece of machinery running, it's a lot better than letting it set for months. So I do it, try not to go over 200 hours, but I always change the fuel filter, that filter there, when I change the oil and oil filter. You're there, you may as well do it.
The reason we think we had trouble on Sorella sat for 7 months.
Yep.
The diesel got thick and filled this up real quick. So that's the suspect.
There you go.
You can check your fuel filters if you've got a vacuum gauge in the fuel.
Yeah, you could. But it's no northern connection. So anyway,
some kind of contamination of the fuel, which can even happen when you're getting fuel from the fuel truck. It happens. Sometimes you get contaminated fuel, and things are going to get flooded sooner. And then her symptom was she lost power. She just didn't have power. She couldn't get, it was fuel starvation. She wasn't getting enough fuel. She could idle fine, but she couldn't go. That was the symptom. Fuel starvation.
okay, yearly and biannual maintenance. You can see 100 hours of fuel filters, and oil change, fuel filter 250. Like I said, if I'm down there, I'm going to change it. Heck with it.
Yeah. You're greasy.
Set valve spacing. We haven't done that. I've only done that on one engine, and that's not. It wasn't on a yearly basis. It's because I needed to. It was the strength of a diesel engine on parts like that are usually pretty good, but we haven't had any problem in 12 years that I've been here doing it. Remove the injectors, rebuild 3 to 5 years. Yeah, but if you can keep the fuel clean and all that, they don't really need that. They've got 2 filters ahead of them that'll keep the crap out of them. Throttle, transmission cable adjustment.
Yep.
Sometimes we run into a problem with the transmissions not shifting or only going one way or not doing this. And you can check it for that because they get a little sloppy. Check the glow plugs. Now that one's a real good one. You just put your hand on it, right? If you increase in temperature, it's working. Raw water impeller. If you're not having trouble, I wouldn't get into it, you know, unless you think you've got something wrong. And if it's wrong, it'll let you know.
Yeah,
Most of the problems we've had with them is when junk get on. When that strainer lets something go by, or something gets in there, like one of them I had where it was sitting on the dock, and we couldn't get any water. Well, luckily there was a diver next door, and I asked him to go down and look, and he brought me back a plastic bag. So that can do it to you, obviously, and it can happen anyhow. Engine alignment and mount adjustment. That's usually something that you shouldn't have to mess with at all. That's done when you put the engines in. We've got to align them to the transmissions in some cases, and then to the drive shafts. They have to fit on there. So that's something that should not go anywhere. All right, Howard Electrical Systems. I don't know whether, that's going to be in, I'm 6 minutes ahead of time.
Good. It's a good thing. I got too many slides in this one. Let's see how fast we can do this. What do you got? All right. Basic wiring diagram. I'm an electrical engineer. I love wiring diagrams.
You live for them, okay?
I live with them. I live for them. They're my life.
Okay.
So many ways. And even when I have to work on a boat, that's one of the first things I go to.
Okay.
This is actually a slide from the original deck. A lot of these slides, by the way, came from the last time we did this presentation in 2019 for Fairwind. It's been a while, 6 years. This is from that one. This is actually out of the Western Beak manual. It's an older version. They're used for troubleshooting. They don't always match the current boat system, by the way. The wiring diagrams and that's actually the Western Beak manual. The Catalina manuals that are on all of our boats that have wiring diagrams in them, in my experience, most of them don't match how that boat is actually wired. They're close, but they don't match. This is one of those, but essentially it shows you how everything's wired, right? Next slide is a version I like better. I marked this up in 2017. I said, I found one that actually matches our boats. How weird. And everything's on here, you know, from power coming in, ignition switch, what was it turned on, all the signals that go to the gauges, all the signals that go to the sensors, the alternator, the alarm switches on the engine, oil pressure switch, the preheat solenoid for the lift pumps, the starter, it's all on here. And I'm going to try to go through it quick. But everything's on here as far as what goes where. So depending if you're having trouble with any particular item, this will tell you usually where it's coming from. I'm annotated on here. This line's coming from this device going that way. This is coming from that device going that way. I've sent this out to many members over the years. I have copies I forgot to bring. Anyway. But for right now, I wanted to focus on several things that have come up recently that actually come up every year. One of them is the way the lift pump works, and the glow plug solenoid, oil pressure switch, and the alarms. We have several boats, I think Little Z and Islandside still have problems with these systems. And the way those systems work is when you turn the key switch one position on, that just turns power on. It's the ignition switch, right? It turns power on to that ignition panel. Your gauges, lights, sensors, right? So all it does is turn that panel on. And for all the boats that have a lift pump and glow plugs, the key switch now has that spring-loaded start position. In some vehicles, you do that and it's cranking the starter. Start, you let it go, it springs back. On our boats, when you hold it in that spring-loaded position, what it's doing is it's turning on your glow plugs and your lift pump, which is, and usually our instructions on the boat say hold that over there for 10 seconds, right? This is your lift pump is getting fuel to the injector, so it's ready to pump fuel. Glow plugs warming the cylinders to help the cold engine start.
You hear a click click?
You hear, while a lift pump is running, if you're down near lift pump, you can hear it clicking usually. Then you let go of that, push the start button, and you start very quickly. Good. The path of that is when you're holding that switch hard over. This is the glow plug solenoid. It's got 12 volts coming into it, and then when it's turned on, it hits the 12 volts on the glow plug to heat them up. That switch, when you hold it over, hits the glow plug engaged terminal here, so it makes that circuit. It also, while you hold it over, puts 12 volts out here to a little circuit breaker, which is now sending power to the lift pump, so it's running at the same time. And it also feeds power back to it eventually feeds the alarm circuit. So you hold it over, lift pump's running, everybody's happy, and then you let go of that switch, you start the engine, and as long as the engine starts and the oil pressure switch gets pressure, the oil pressure switch now says, okay, I got pressure, I'm going to put 12 volts on the lift pump to keep the lift pump running while the engine's running. And the idea there is that if the engine loses oil pressure, big bad problem, that happens, the oil pressure switch turns off, it actually turns the lift pump off. And this little way of saying, engine stop, you don't have oil pressure. Most engines will run for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, they're all different without the lift pump running, and depending how fast you're going. But eventually it will stop the engine. But when the oil pressure switch goes off, if you're running, and also when this output, this is putting 12 volts on this line, right? This is also going to the alarm system, oil pressure alarm system. The oil pressure alarm system wants a low-level ground signal to turn the alarm on, okay? And normally when the engine's running, you got 12 volts on there, everybody's happy. If the oil pressure switch says, hey, no more oil pressure, it turns off, this line no longer is at 12 volts. That goes to the alarm says, whoa, we're at ground, turns the oil pressure alarm on that you all hear. Whenever you first turn the key on, the engine's not running, first thing you hear, the oil pressure alarm. Beep, 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 beep. That says, hey, your ignition's on, and I got no oil pressure. That's the heat test. And that, we never want to hear that when we're running, but it's also neat because you're actually fully testing that system. You turn the key on, the alarm comes on because the oil pressure switch is working. When the engine starts up and the alarm goes off, the oil pressure switch is working. You just check the oil pressure switch. It's working. It's pretty cool. The other one is water temperature switch. And that's telling you the engine's overheated when that goes off. And when it goes off, it grounds the other side of the alarm to turn on the continuous alarm, which is a constant long term, which we hope we never hear. That means you're already overheated. Just remember, these don't trip until about 205 degrees. When your engine's at 205 degrees, yeah, it's overheated. The alarm's going off, but it's already overheated. As a matter of fact, it might be have been damaged then already, fortunately, by the time that goes off. Okay. And the other one, there's also a water temperature sender, which is what, of course, moves your temperature gauge, so how hot the engine is. So if you're not watching that gauge while you're running, it's going up and up and up and up, about as soon as it hits 200 or so, the alarm's going to go off. Okay? So this just tells you how those are all hooked together, how they're all wired. Another thing we'll talk about is this is the ignition panel, right? Where the key is, all the gauges. The ignition panel gets power from a 12-volt line coming from the engine. Goes from the engine, well, first it goes from the batteries to the starter, the high current line, heavy battery cable, and then from there it goes through either a breaker or a fuse from the engine and feeds up. And this is that breaker on the engine right here, 20 amp breaker on all the Western Beach Universal, which powers your whole ignition panel. A lot of times, that's one of our problems, is these breakers get tripped. People go to start the boat, the ignition panel is basically dead. You got no power. Nothing works. That's your first culprit. This is mounted on the engine. We'll see that later.
Right here.
Little button right here
If
says
it's a breaker, it's a push reset. If it's a fuse, you gotta replace the fuse. So that's an important one. So that happens all the time. What else is important? Alternator charges the battery. Yeah, we already covered all that. 20 amp breaker. So those are the main things I want you to remember about on the wiring. This glow plug solenoid, I'm going to show you in the next slide, I believe. It's the same as a starter solenoid. It's a starter solenoid. We have a starter solenoid on our starters, and we have a glow plug solenoid for glow plugs.
Sorry, I have no idea what a solenoid is.
Solenoid? It's on your car too. It's on your starter on your
And
car.
I've never looked at it on my
All
car.
it is you get battery power here, right? High power. Starters need a lot of power, right? They run directly off the battery on a big ass battery cable, right? So that battery cable comes in here. This one is going to your starter, and there's an input here that tells the solenoid, turn on solenoid. That closes the solenoid, your starter's cranking while you're holding that switch or pushing your button, whatever you happen to have. Then when you let go of your switch or button, this turns off because you already started, right?
So
That's a solenoid.
The whole idea is you don't have a really, really thick battery cable going all the way up to the ignition.
Right.
Right?
That's right. Yeah, good. It's a current ratio.
There's a solenoid right here.
It's
Right here.
like a switch, basically.
It is a switch. It
It's
is
a
a switch.
switch.
You
It's just-
energize it with smaller current cables to turn to basically close the solenoid and engage the high power battery cable to your starter, or in this case, glow plugs, which also pulls out current. As long as you're holding the switch on, it stays closed, does its thing. Once you start, you let go of the switch, right? Right? Yeah, that's what a solenoid
If
does.
you keep the batteries dead on your car and you replace the battery and it still doesn't start, it's probably.
The solenoid on your starter is probably the culprit, right? Yeah. Next one.
Do you have an exhaust temperature sensor?
No, I don't think any of our books have an exhaust temperature sensor. And that
Some
was,
Yanmar do.
that was, our Yanmars don't.
My Yanmar does.
Okay, yeah, our
I get
Yanmars
the
don't.
alarm.
Our Yanmars don't.
Maybe,
To give you an
That-
idea on that solenoid,
Yeah.
maybe you should
gas
explain.
engine takes
If
about
it's got the start with
180 amps to start it up. Diesel takes about 350, 400.
Yeah,
Either one of those have to, you don't want to run that cable.
yeah.
Right.
That diesel is much higher compression, much harder to turn over. That starter, a much more powerful starter, and a lot more current flowing.
On the solenoid on the starter, maybe you should explain if you cannot start with the start button,
Yeah.
how you can do down at the starter solenoid. In the solenoid.
You mean
No, no.
jump it? I don't think that's for the average person. Right?
No, I don't think we should do
Somebody
that.
stuck over the islands.
Yeah.
They don't want to get called over and find out that that's all they need
Yeah,
to do.
yeah.
To check the solenoid.
You're right. If the starter button has failed, and yeah, you can hot wire your starter, you know, but I wouldn't recommend it unless you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, wait.
The solenoid on your starter is just like on your car. Really, you got the battery power coming in, right? High battery coming in, high current to the starter, and you energize the coil of the starter to close those contacts. Usually you put plus here and ground there. Closes the solenoid, right? Starter's cranking, and you let go of your key, it turns this off, you're done. On the glow plug solenoid, you must use a special, what's called a Ford 4-terminal type. Standard starter solenoids will not work, because on this one, Ford did this originally for some of the cars. The reason they did it was they have vehicles that use a resistor in the primary power circuit to the coil to lower the voltage. This terminal momentarily sends a full 12 volts to the coil to help start their engines. That's why Ford used it. Why we need them for our glow plug solenoid is, as I just described before, on these terminals, this is the start, which is close the solenoid. This is putting out 12 volts to go to the lift pump, to run the lift pump. It's ground on our regular starter solenoid. This one, basically this 12 volt output is following this one. As long as this thing is engaged, putting 12 volts out here, I got 12 volts out here, it goes to our lift pump. If you put a regular starter solenoid here, that's ground. That ain't gonna help your lift pump. You have to make sure you get this kind of solenoid for the glow plug solenoid. That's all. Just something I need to remember. And you just go to the auto parts store and here's one. This is durable ass. That is the right one. It has S and I terminals on it. Start. The I terminal is used. It's called ignition in the Ford world. That's all. Just make sure we get that straight. Just want to make sure you knew that one. Next. All right. This is actually on the back of Size new 25XD. Cool. There's that solenoid. Here is that 10 amp relay that's hooked to that I terminal. That 10 amp relay is feeding that 12 volts to the fuel pump. Okay. Here's her electric fuel pump, lift pump. There's that 20 amp push button breaker that feeds power to the ignition panel. If it ever does pop, your ignition panel's dead. Check that first. The heat exchanger that they can show you over here. Keep going.
So this says some of them may have a fuse, so you actually need to replace the fuses.
Yes, yeah. I think the Yanmars and the Beta have fuses. The Westerbeeks and Universals have breakers,
Right.
like that one.
Which you could actually just manually reset.
Yep.
People don't know necessarily what
Yep.
way.
Exactly. That's why I put that in there. Yeah.
Okay.
All boats are different. This was on the old slide set. There actually were standard color codes used on marine wiring. I have found that my wires aren't these colors on most of our boats, but anyway, there's a standard. However, that wiring diagram that I liked, that one is really close. Alarm systems, okay. We talked about there's an oil pressure alarm, over temperature alarm. Some folks have a low voltage alarm. Actually, the Beta has one. I don't know how many other ones have a low voltage alarm that goes off. And then raw water flow. Raw water flow, Fairwind has tried that on our boats for 10 to 12 years. I think it's about 12 years, 13 years now. And I've heard the stories where they tried putting in raw water flow alarms like this one. This is still on island size. Bought from a company called Aqua Alarm. Because being able to know when your raw water flow has been lost. If you're running your engine and your raw water flow is lost, the engine doesn't care, it keeps running. It doesn't know. And unless you're watching your temp gauge go, you don't know until that alarm goes off. Right. But now you're already at 200, you're already overheated, it's about to boil over. To me, that's too late to be told you've got a problem. Raw water flow alarms can tell you in advance, hey, the raw water flow is slowed down, something's wrong. Or you've got no raw water flow. But if they tell you that before your engine overheats.
How much time is it between the overheat and the information from that sensor?
The raw water flow, again, will tell you that you've lost your raw water flow. The moment that happens, right, as soon as your raw water flow goes from normal to not normal, how long is the engine running? I'm going to say it depends on how much your raw water flow got dropped and how fast you're running the engine.
Yeah.
You could lose a lot of raw water flow and still be able to idle. There's still enough to cool it, right? For example, Charm pulls 2.2 gallons a minute at idle. 2.2 gallons a minute of raw water, that's what she's pushing at idle.
Mm-hmm.
At full throttle, she's pushing 5 gallons a minute. Okay? I'm going to guess she could run with 1 gallon a minute at idle, she wouldn't overheat. Maybe even 0.8, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's 1 gallon a minute, 0.8, and you push her up to 3,000 RPM, that ain't gonna work. She's gonna start overheating. It's not enough cooling, right? So the raw water flow alarms give you that advance notice before you overheat.
Sometimes, depends on when it happens, I guess, or how fast
Well,
you-
no. I mean, if you're running, and hopefully you're watching your gauge occasionally, okay, we're running fine, temp's okay, la 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 la, and then you suck up a plastic bag. Okay? You don't know it. The engine doesn't know it. It doesn't care. It's running. It's running 3,000 RPM. Your temp gauge is going to start doing this. But if you're not watching it, you're down below, I mean, there's nothing to tell you until your over temperature alarm goes off. And now you're already overheating. The engine could have even been damaged already. Because they don't go off until 205 degrees. The raw water flow alarms will go off when you first lose your raw water, before you overheat. It gives you time to react. That's all.
And it's a loud enough alarm to hear it over the engine.
Hopefully. Hopefully, yeah. The alarm intensities, the alarm modules themselves, yeah, they're different on the different boats. Yeah, but Mark III is a little dull, or new one.
And Jeff has done a custom design.
Anyway, so this is an old style one, and the history was on the ones we could buy commercially, because it happened to Charm when we first got her. She would run the through hole closed, she overheated, or she would run through hole closed, and what happens when you lose your raw water is, first thing is those impeller blades, the rubber impeller blades, once there's no water in there anymore, and they're spinning at full engine speed, they're just going to overheat and break off. And when they break off, you're going to lose all your water flow anyway. And on her, it happened, she lost all her blades. But somehow somebody noticed there was no more raw water flow coming out the back, so they did shut it down. I'm not sure how hot she got, but there was no alarm to tell you, hey, your engine's running and you have no raw water moving. That's all. So, yes, I'm now installing, this is an old one, I'm sorry, the commercial ones, the problem we have with them was our engines are small, very small, 2, 3 cylinders, and 1 4-cylinder, you'll see, diesels. Commercial alarms were just designed for bigger engines. And when we take our little guys down to idle, those alarms kept going off, even though we're fine. And we tried several of them. And I bought one for Charm too, which they advertised as being their new small engine, low flow version. I'm like, oh great, finally. I put it on Charm, same problem. Anywhere she got close to idle or idle, alarm goes off. Because again, she was running 2.2 gallons and it wanted at least 3. And it wasn't adjustable. This one on the island side, I learned from Optical Alarm. And this thing is probably 15 years old now. They discontinued this 10 years ago because of problems with it. But this one was adjustable. You could actually try to adjust it. This one, all it has in there is a little paddle. And as faster the water is moving, the more it pushes the paddle. If it goes fast enough, closes the switch. Saying, you're okay, you got flow. And the flow goes down, switch opens, goes up, alarm, right? Stop over the paddle. Anyway, I'm now putting in a new version of flow alarms. There's some of them over here you can look at. These actually have a turbine spinning inside. There's a Hall effect sensor on top of it that detects the speed of the impeller that's staying in there. Generates an output frequency proportional to the water flow. And I have an alarm module I made that monitors that flow, and I set each one of them to trip where I want them to trip. On charms, their normal flow rate is 2.2, I set it to trip at 1.5. So if my flow even goes down to 1.5, the alarm goes off. I don't wait till it gets to 0. I want the advance warning. That's one, because if it's down to 1.5, something's wrong.
Do all our boats
See,
have
either she's
this?
lost some blades on her impeller, or she's got something got sucked up, something's blocking flow, right?
Do all the boats have the water flow alarm?
No, right now only Ironside has one that's working.
Charm.
But we are putting them in all the boats.
You have it on Charm and Mark III right now.
Huh?
We have
Oh,
it on
I'm
Charm and
sorry,
Mark
yeah. Ironside was the only one that had one. When the problem happened with Charm at the time, and I first designed mine, I installed hers in September 2023. It's been running for 17 months now, problem free. It's gone out several times to warn us of a problem. When we put Mark III's brand new $15,000 Beta engine in there, we put a flow alarm in there. And that's also gone out several times now to warn us of a problem. Last time it happened because the zinc broke off. The zinc went down and got lodged in the tubing and got stuck, blocking water flow. They were out, the head are out, the alarm went off. They said we could still see water flow out the back, okay, because it wasn't cut to 0 yet. But because the alarm kept going off, they brought her in to slip, thank goodness. When I checked her the next day, her water flow was down to 0.8. And I didn't know yet that the zinc had broken off, but and later Michaelini told me, oh yeah, when they checked her last work day, Jesse said the zinc broke off. And they didn't fish it out.
Where did you find it?
It was stuck in Mark III. It's about a 1-inch hose coming out the heat exchanger. And it goes through reducing fittings to get it to 5/8 hoses. With the rest of the output is the 5/8 hoses. It's got lodged in those 90-degree fittings. Yeah.
Reduce the load.
But if they had just kept without that alarm, and with only 0.8 gallons a minute, if they were just out there full throttle, she would have overheated. Or a brand new, expensive engine. So once that happened, they decided, Jeff, put them in all the boats, please.
Yes.
So we're making them for all the boats.
Before it gets hot.
They'll be rolled out in the next few months.
Next.
Jeff's got a team.
Original slides from before, just all the basic controls, everything is on. A typical ignition panel, that's from the Catalina 30, like Sorella and Mark III. Ignition key, flow plug, left pump, power over to engage, push button for starting. Now, like I said, that push button switch fails sometimes and it won't start. If that's your problem, yeah, you go down and hot wire the starter if you know how, or hot wire that switch from the backside if you know how. Fuel stop lever, most of them have that. Mark III's Beta has a push button stop, looks like that one. Light and all the alarms. On these panels, there are, besides the alarm going off and beeping, there are alarm indicator lights that go off to tell you which alarm it is. This one says the high temperature alarm. This is low oil pressure alarm. Go to the next one. On Charm, she has a third one, low water flow alarm, so is Mark III. So when you have that alarm go off, one of the first things you should do is which light is on. That tells you which alarm just got triggered, and then you can react. If it was low oil pressure, there's other things you should do. If it's high water temperature, things you should do. I have a list of what to do later. It tells you which alarm is sounding in the alarm, so you know which one. Next one. Here's some old slides from before. Open up those panels. Extra a rat's nest of wires in there. This is on Wojo, I think. Yeah. They were troubleshooting the tachometer problem. Tachometers get their signal for engine speed from the alternator, usually. Either that, or they get it right off the flywheel. This is they were pulling out the tack wire. I think they had a problem with the tachometer wire coming from the alternator. Or actually, I think Wojo's comes from the flywheel, but anyway, the signal comes into the tack. Here, next one. Here's an example of the back of an alternator. And I think that's the tachometer output. Some of them actually are measuring the speed of the flywheel. And there's a pickup on the magnetic pickup, I believe, on the flywheel that sends that signal. A big difference here is the flywheel has the actual engine speed. So it's giving you the actual engine speed. Tachometers, depending on which tach it is, that output frequency can be usually 2 to 3 to 4 times what the engine speed is. Depends on how the pulley ratios on the pulleys that are turning them, and how the alternator is built. So when you use an alternator, all the tachometers are going to have. Can you back up the slide? Or two? Oh wait, that one. The tachometer has a setting, that little switch back here, so you can adjust it for which tach you have, so it reads correctly. Because the alternator is going to be spinning your 2 to 3 times the speed of your engine, and it needs to know which alternator am I looking at. Anyway, okay, go forward. So 2 types, depending on the boat. Next one. This was an old slide. It's telling you how much amperage the alternator can put out. And this is at engine RPMs. Okay, so obviously lower RPMs, the alternator can't put out as much current as it can at higher RPMs. Okay. Next one. Let's see. Oh, okay, the mechanical fuel pump. Most of our older engines have an electric fuel pump on the engine, right? And that's the only fuel pump that's trying to get fuel from the fuel tank once you pull through the rate core and the fuel filter, trying to get fuel to your engine's fuel injector pump so we can pump it up to 2,000 psi. On the Yanmars, they actually have a lift pump built into the engine. It runs off the engine, not off of 12 volts like the electric ones do. So they also don't have a key switch to turn on the lift pump. Doesn't have a lift pump, right? They also don't have low flux. The Yanmar, the way they designed their engine was just a different design, and they actually do not need low flux to start, even cold. So just remember that. Not all boats have lift pumps or low flux. So they also don't have a spring-loaded start position on the key. It's not there. Okay? These are conditioners that are on or off on both boats. So they're different than the others. Mechanical lift pumps, they do have a lever you can actuate to manually pump fuel. Usually, the only time you need to manually pump fuel is if you're trying to bleed air out of the system. You open up the bleed valve, you pump fuel until you're pumping the air out of the bleed valve until you get a clean flow of fuel, and you close the bleed valve. The rate core, in my opinion, is much easier to pump the rate core pump.
This is the bleed valve.
Yeah, there's actually at least 2 bleed valves. There's one, usually that's by one on. This is by the filter. This is the filter.
Right.
The
what
filter.
I want to get at is that's where you can bleed it off.
Yeah.
You think you've got air
Yeah.
in here.
Yeah.
You take it off. Don't stick your head over the top of that hole.
Yeah.
It'll get
Yeah.
you. So you're going to make a mess. Loosen it up.
Yeah.
And then pump slowly with this thing.
Yeah.
And it will.
We'll let you guys do that part.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you know what? Anytime you change, like this is the engine filter is a unscrew canister type, right, on this engine. And when you take that out, it's full of fuel. You take out the old canister, you put the clean one in. Make sure you fill that back with fuel before you screw it back in, because the more air you have in there, the more air you need to bleed out. And screw it back in. So this bleed valve will get that air out. Then this line out of the filter goes up to the input of your high injection fuel pump. There's a bleed valve there. I always bleed that one because now I'm also getting the air out of there, from here to there. That's all. This one will get it out from here back. That one will get out the rest of it. That's all.
In theory, you don't have to do that, but it helps.
Yeah.
Because that goes to the pump and bypasses the pump.
Yeah. Anyway, that's that slide. What else we got? Nice to be. This is actually the old engine out of Little Z. Right? So don't have this anymore, but it's common. Oil pressure sender, 2 wires. You got plus coming in, switch going out, as we talked about on that wiring diagram. As long as you got oil pressure, it closes and it puts 12 volts out there, which 12 volts will turn on the lift pump, keep it running while your engine's running. 12 volts also keeps the alarm, oil pressure alarm going off, because the alarm wants it ground. I put 12 volts on there, it's not ground anymore. And if this thing loses oil pressure, it opens up, we lose our 12 volts, alarm turns on. Coolant temperature, this is a sender. If it's a sender, then that's the one driving the temperature gauge, right? And these are all resistive devices to case, to ground. And as the resistance changes, it drives that temperature gauge. Starter solenoid wire. Okay, this is, again, going to the starter solenoid, not the glow plug solenoid, the starter solenoid. That's the starter solenoid wire. And here's the heavy-duty battery cable. Is that what that is? 12-volt line, battery to starter. It feeds the engine. Oh yeah, it also feeds the engine through that 20-amp breaker. Yeah. And we got the new engine in Little Z. Yay! What's better? And that's just saying, yeah, we have to replace the engine. Significant cost savings by doing it ourselves. Oh, now this is just a wiring mess, but unfortunately, that's what they all look like when you open up their panels. This is angle seats. Yeah. Anybody want to figure that out?
Just
if you don't have the wiring diagram, it's going to be really hard. With the wiring diagram, it is a lot easier.
Just if you're ever going to open that, make sure you turn everything off.
Well, yeah, the caution down here says that if you got shore power on, that means there's live AC in there. You can cut, and yeah, you know the story. Keep going. Keep going. All right. Battery management. Okay. Existing one. All right. Most boats have multiple batteries. We have at least one battery we try to designate for starting of the engine, and then we have house batteries, usually 1 or 2 house batteries that we usually use to try to power everything else on the boat. Especially when you're not cruising and you're anchored, you want to usually not drain your engine battery by running all your lights and appliances and everything else. If you drain your engine battery too far, you may not be able to start the next morning. So usually we only run our house, all of our appliances, lights, everything off the house batteries. Drain the house batteries. Don't drain your engine battery. Standard lead acid batteries, 12.6 volts. We saw that before. Battery voltage drops as the charge is lost. Alternator will charge them up to about 14.2. Battery chargers also will charge them to about 14.2. Quick check of the voltage gives you status of the battery. Most of our panels have these guys where you can actually push this to the one side, it checks battery 1, push it to the other side, it checks battery 2, it'll give you a voltage reading. That simple way, just make it a quick check of your battery voltage. Of course, if you check that while they're being charged, you're going to measure the charge voltage. You turn the chargers off and check it, you'll see, well, what's the battery by itself? Percos. Yeah. Battery selector. So again, most of our batteries have an engine battery and a house battery. And the house battery can be 1 or 2 batteries together. The both are different. If you got 2 of them together, it'll last longer. Perco can select battery 1. This one's not labeled, but on Charm, that's your engine battery, number 1. Number 2 is your house battery. All will connect both batteries together. Only 2 times I would say you never want to be in all. One is when the engine is running and you're cruising, the alternator is now charging batteries, right? In the case of the alternator is only going to charge whatever battery this is hooked to. If I'm on engines, that's how I started it. And when I'm running, the alternator is only going to charge that battery. It's not going to top off these guys. So it's a good policy to, once you're running, and you're gonna run for a while, switch it to all, because now your alternator will be charging all your batteries. So, there's no diagram coming later that shows that. And when you're at anchor and you've got all your lights on and you're gonna be there for 3 days, and make sure you're only on house. Drain the house batteries, so if you kill them, you can still start the next day. Not all of them, but some of them have breaker switches. This particular one with these little red handles where you have to pull them, turn them on, and push them, turn them off, these break all the time. I've already had to replace one of Charms. I took it out and put a regular lever circuit breaker on this, so it won't break. This one is just, when you turn it on, it's simply applying power to that panel. We never turn them off, you don't need to. If you want to turn them off, you just turn this off. Anyway, this is for the windlass, to turn the power on to the windlass. And you should only leave power on to the windlass when you're using it, and please turn it off when you're not using it so it doesn't actually get stepped on the front and turn on. This one has a separate Perco for where the engine gets its power from. Alright, I'm sorry, if you want the engine to have power or not to the starter. And notice this little mark here says, we mentioned earlier before, stop the engine before switching off to prevent alternator damage. That's what that says. Stop, turn off, or I'll say, stop engine before turning this off. If the engine's running, the alternator's running, and generating, and charged to everything, and you shut off power, DC power to the rest of the boat, that can damage the alternator. Then they have to be fixed or replaced. So, make that a habit.
Could you talk about LiPo banner?
About which one?
LiPo?
They're coming up.
Okay.
Not that number,
But they have battery management systems.
Yeah, yeah. Mistral is rather unique, probably because he's French. He has a separate Perco for the engine, either it's on or off, a separate Perco for house, either on and off, and you can also disconnect ground, which none of our other boats can do that. She's wired very uniquely, especially in her batteries, you'll see later. Anyway, typical panel on the Catalina 30, like Sorella Mark III. All the AC controls are over here, DC controls over here for lights, pumps, radios, systems. Next. And most of the boats should have a multimeter on board, hopefully. Multimeters are so handy just to check simple things like, what's my battery measure? Anyway. Or you can use that little gauge on the panel if you want. This one typically showing you got an engine battery, I got house batteries in parallel, and again just talking about the Perco selectors and how things get routed, and how pushing the buttons can put power on the glow plugs, blah blah blah. Same thing. So here's one that shows what I was kind of talking about. So battery power, Perco says, all right, go off the starting battery. Okay. That means everything on the boat, all the lights, controls, your radios, everything, the starter, is all running off of the engine battery right now, because he says so. If the engine's running in this position, the alternator is only going to charge him. It's not going to charge these two. That was my point. If you go to both, the alternator will charge all of them while you're running. However, the battery charger on the boat is wired individually. It'll always charge both batteries. It has two outputs, no matter where it's set. Just keep that in mind. Next. This is Mistral. She is confusing as hell. Michael Lee was here, he was helping me explain. But apparently, as originally wired, the alternator charged the starter battery only, and you couldn't do anything about that. It would never charge the house battery. Only the battery charger would charge the house battery. There was no way to cross-connect them. So they actually added some combiners and a bypass system So now, we can control everything. We can have, the alternator can charge all of them or not. The chargers can charge all of them or not. You can select which one you use for cranking, how, anyway. And you have to understand how these, there's instructions on them that leave me off, leave me on. And this is a combiner. The combiner is a smart combiner, so what it does is, anytime, go to the next one. That's the combiner. Automatically combines batteries during charging, but it isolates them when discharging and when starting. So it does it by itself. You don't have to change Perco settings. Pretty cool. Anyway, so Mistro's unique in that regard, but there are instructions on there for how to work. Keep going. Battery selection chart. Now you're talking about which one?
LiPo.
LiPo? No, not here.
With battery management.
This is from their 2019 presentation. Wasn't there. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, wasn't there. But it is talking about gels were popular back in, but they weren't the suggested one to use. They weren't the optimum. They actually weren't better than lead acid. Not really. But this is just an old chart because there's so many different types of batteries you put in the boats or in your car for that matter. Yeah. Pros and cons. How much cranking power they have, reserve capacity they have. Anyway, next slide. Marine batteries. Solid lead acid, high current for short duration. Thin plates allow discharge. This is for cranking. These are cranking batteries. Then there's the deep cycle batteries, right? Which we want to use for our house batteries. Because on our boats, our engine batteries are only used to start the engine. Just like your car. Just like your car. High current just to start it. Way higher current than a house battery. That's just to start the engine. Deep cycle is what we need for an RV, boats that are an anchor, batteries that can tolerate having the voltage go down and down as you drain them on an RV, boat, whatever. They're more tolerant of discharging the batteries farther. These cranking batteries, you get those things down to 11 volts, 10 volts, they're not happy anymore, and they may not come back all the way again. You don't want to discharge a regular lead acid battery too far. That's why in your car, it never gets discharged. As soon as you start it, it folds it down, but then the engine charges it back up. They're always kept this full. Deep cycle is good when you need to draw power for a while before charging again. So, again, RVs, boats at anchor. That's why most of our house batteries should be deep cycle. Starting battery should be a high cranking type battery. They make dual purpose. They say they're dual purpose batteries, but back in 2019, Mike said that wasn't a good solution. I think it's still not a good solution. Charm, when we evaluated her before we bought her, we noted her batteries were bad. Hers are really large D batteries. The owner replaced them for us, so he put in standard batteries. Yeah. They're not deep cycle. Okay. I was worried about that, but because of their size, they're big D batteries. Her first cruise, Mike Delaney took her out and ran some tests for us to see how much the house battery was being drained. With turning lights on, radios on and stuff. They performed fine because it's a really big battery. And since then, other cruisers have had no problems. But when it's time to replace them, she's getting deep cycle. Cranking versus deep cycle. All right. Cranking. It can put out 1,000 amps with a reserve capacity of 130. Deep cycle can only put out 15 amps. Reserve capacity is about the same. But they can tolerate being discharged farther, which happens when you're draining them with your lights on just without charging for a long time, right? Running on your stuff. Again, just like an RV, same thing. Battery spec, okay, CCA, yeah, continuous cranking now, okay? CCA versus NCA, marine cranking amps. Different. That's how much cranking amps they can have for 30 seconds for the different temperatures. Okay. I didn't say that was earlier. Reserve capacity. Now, that's how many minutes a fully charged battery at 80 degrees C can discharge 25 amps until the battery gets too low. Okay, reserve capacity. 25 amps, that's a lot of current. That's for every light and radio and iPod and everything else you can turn on. You'll never get a 25 amp, I don't think. But anyway, it's a standard battery rating. If you ever want to compare batteries. Amp hours, that's again another rating, same thing. Discharge 25 amps until the battery gets down. Okay, same thing. Ratings on our batteries. Most of us decide which battery to put in our boats. Battery management. Okay. Some of our boats, the bigger boats, actually have hard interface, battery managers that also have inverters built into them, right? Inverters, you know what that is? That's a device that can generate your 110 AC from your battery voltage, right? I think only the large boats have those. I think they all have. Yeah.
All the large boats?
Not all the large boats might have, I think have
inverters.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Z has an inverter but does not have an interface, it just has a voltage.
Yeah. Okay, none of the mediums have inverters. And what's that showing me? I mean, cranky battery, house battery, a lot of duplicate information, guys. Sorry. Yeah, well, we didn't know where all that. But
I just want to say something about using inverters.
yeah,
And
there's
I
a
did
slide
do
coming
that.
up with microwaves
There is?
about that.
Oh, microwave. Yeah, no.
Yeah, don't do it.
No. So when you get on a boat and you want to charge your phone and
Yeah.
other things,
And you have an AC
you have an
adapter
AC
only.
adapter only.
Yeah.
Then you're actually wasting a lot of power.
Oh yeah.
So you really want to have some of the boats have USB direct. You can just plug in and charge on that.
Yeah.
And some of them have
Yeah.
have the like the cigarette lighters. They don't call that anymore. What do they call those?
Yeah.
12 cigarette lighters.
12 volt
Integrate.
outputs.
So
12
I
volt
always
outputs,
carry
yeah.
one of those with me
Yeah,
as well.
but those are all just using the battery power directly. An inverter is taking that battery power, trying to convert to 110 AC, and it's not 100% efficient. It loses power trying to do that. Loses battery power trying to do that. And then it tries to charge your phone. So yeah.
When you charge your phone and you plug it into AC, do you ever feel that it gets warm? That's inefficiency. It's losing energy through heat.
Generating heat. Yeah.
It's generating heat. So especially if you're out on a cruise for a couple of days, you don't want to be wasting power.
Yeah. I know. Next.
Okay.
Battery discharge cycles. Look at that later. That doesn't fit. Yeah, don't need that.
Okay.
Here we go. Microwave. Don't do it. Running off the inverters. Even, I mean, if you have to, at least make sure your engine's running. But here, this as an example, and these are actual microwaves that are in our boats. This guy, he's a regular 1,000 watt microwave, 1,580 watts power consumption. So, on plugged into the wall, he's pulling 13.2 amps. Trying to get that 13.2 amps, 120 out of your inverter that's trying to get off of a 12 volt battery. I think you're pulling 150 amps. Trying to off your battery. All right, 2 house batteries in parallel, we know all that. Thermo King, 1,800 watt output. Okay. Input 12 volt off your battery, 150 amps off your battery to run that freaking microwave. And that's 90% efficient. There's no inverter. The inverter will draw about 150 amps to power the microwave. That's the problem. Batteries
Thermo King's a microwave? What is that?
I don't know, but that's what it is.
It's a thing.
I couldn't tell you.
That's all we know.
This is from 2019. I don't know that it exists anymore on any boat.
Is that the inverter?
Refrigerator?
This is a microwave.
Oh, it's a microwave.
These are both microwaves.
That's the inverter on the
That one?
Oh, there, the Thermo King.
Okay, thanks. Never mind. That's the inverter. That's probably the inverter on that boat, trying to drive that microwave on that boat. Yeah.
Oh.
This is, Mike put this together, I think, years ago. But the inverter's going to draw 150 amps to power the microwave. Okay. Battery can provide high current for about 30 seconds. Can the battery provide 150 amps for 10 minutes to cook your lasagna? No. Will high load draw down the voltage, causing the inverter to drop out? Possibly. You load the battery go, I'm a 12 volt battery. 150 amps? I'm an 8 volt battery. Yeah. Will running the engine alternator reduce the strain on the batteries? Yes, because now the alternator can help provide some of that power, but it's not going to give you that. Will batteries be damaged? Possibly. So my rule of thumb is don't do it. If you got short power, no problem. But running off your batteries or off an inverter, I think the club says no, don't do it. When we bought Charm, she actually had a microwave inside. She has no inverter though, so that was fine. Only to run off the short power if you had it. But realistically, since I knew that would rarely ever get used, I took it out and gave me a lot more storage. What you need in your galley, not a microwave.
Barbecues work great.
And barbecues work great. Next.
That's it.
Drivetrain.
Before, you can
Yeah,
cover
we
that
need to
now?
take a break.
Oh, break time.
Break. So
We'll take a
before
break.
you take a break, Jeff, sorry,
Yep.
just
question.
something that wasn't covered, I didn't think, was if you're cruising,
Yep.
how often should you, if your batteries get low, when should you start recharging, and how long should you run the engine to charge the battery? There's a rule of thumb on that. Right?
There is a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
you said when you're cruising. Well,
Well, when
if-
you're out,
if-
when you're out,
So your anchor, so engine's not running, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, again, a regular lead acid, if it gets down to 10.5, 11 volts, it wants to be recharged.
Yeah.
Right? If it's a deep cycle battery, it can get down to 10 volts. And
Yeah,
it's still,
but you
and it-
really wanna-
And it's still happy. It's still happy.
I know,
But-
I wouldn't go below 11.
No. Rule of thumb, that's a good rule of thumb. But then the only thing you can do if you can't plug in somewhere is you got to run the engine, right, to charge the batteries back up. So again, all of the boats on their AC/DC panels have a little meter where you can check your battery voltage. Or they also have a multimeter on board. You can actually measure them to make sure to see what they're at. But yeah, and again,
10.5 is really,
And you should-
10.5 is kind of low.
for the deep cycles, they're okay. For a regular one, that's too low.
So I would say 11 volts,
Yeah,
and you should run it
I'll go 11.
at like
It's
50.
safer.
You should run your engine at like 1500 RPM, something like that.
Well, the faster the alternator's charging, the more it puts out. It showed you that on the
Yeah,
curve,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
But the amount of current that the battery charger, the alternator needs to charge the batteries, is only going to put not even 10 amps of the battery charging. It's going to be at 5. Yeah, I don't know. But so I think at idle almost it's not charging as fast as 1500. I think. Maybe.
I think what you're saying is best policy is to check the voltage like every day or every other day.
Yeah,
if
right
you're-
on the panel. Yeah, right on the
I mean,
panel.
every other day or every day you should check it if you're out at the islands or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're not running your engine, if you're sailing all the time, you need to
Yep,
be running
yep.
and charge the
Yep.
Okay, let's take a break. Restrooms are over there. We'll do Q&A at the end. Okay, so we're going to do drivetrain. So we're taking you from the engine to the transmission, to the coupling, to the shaft, to the prop, and then we're going to do troubleshooting. So, and troubleshooting, Preben is fantastic at this. He breaks everything down to its smallest, and he knows how to work the way back. He's just got the brain for it. So if you really have a lot of troubleshooting, call Preben. He'll figure it out, believe me. He's Preben will troubleshoot anything. He's amazing.
The thing that's important to you as a skipper is here. In transmission requirements in reverse or neutral, rotating when sailing, never at forward. That's on all of them except the and bars. So you either, the best way to do it is put DMR transmissions, they want them in neutral and never in forward. And the TMCs, neutral when sailing, never in forward. And as you see, they're not sure about reverse or whatever. The current Kansies must be left in neutral when sailing. And if you put them in reverse, they'll lock up. It's just like that.
That's really important for everybody, because I don't think we're trained this, but some transmissions will have, if you're sailing, engine's not running, you're sailing, if you're transitioning gear, forward or reverse, depending on the transmission, you can screw up the transmission. I think generally the safest thing to do is neutral. They all say we like neutral. Some agree, some disagree. They say, well, now the prop's spinning in neutral. Well, sorry, save the transmission. But please try to remember, once you motor out, see, you got your sails up, you go sailing, don't leave the training gear. Put it in neutral. That's all.
Yeah. Yes.
It's hard to remember. Make it.
All along what we were going to say, because we called the manufacturers.
Yeah.
No. The engine's running. If you're neutral, you're not going anywhere. Okay? The thing is, once you motor out and you're sailing, when you're motoring, you're in gear, right? And then you turn the engine off to sail, you're still in gear. Put it in neutral while you're sailing. Because some transmissions don't like being in neutral or reverse when you're sailing. So the safest thing to do is to remember to put them in neutral while you're sailing.
Yeah, we don't have folding props. I mean, our props don't fold like some props do.
Some do. Big C does.
Big Z does.
Big C does. Yeah.
And with Z, if you're sailing and you can, if the prop hasn't folded, you'll hear it rotating when you're in neutral. You just put it into gear really quick and take it back out. It'll cause the prop to fold, and then the transmission won't be turned.
Great.
Anyway, I was about to say that, as you can see, the only thing that any of these have in common is neutral. Some of them say you can put it in reverse, and some of them say don't put it in reverse. And none of them say put it forward. One of them, we spent about 2 weeks contacting manufacturers and so on about this, and you get a half answer on all of them. So we just decided that as far as the club's concerned, anytime you're not driving that transmission, put it in neutral. Period. If you're just out there floating around, you got the engine going, put it in neutral. You want to go somewhere? Go somewhere. But I'll guarantee you, you put this in reverse, and it'll lock immediately. So if you get in that situation, that's on the larger boats. The only thing to do is go ahead and start the engine, and then it'll be in reverse and it'll stay in reverse, but then you can get it out of reverse. Get it neutral and shut the engine off.
To turn the engine back on, you have to be neutral to turn the engine back on.
No.
That's true, I guess you don't.
No.
But you could have
It won't go.
It won't go. It don't make any difference. But like it, just go ahead and start the engine, and it'll be in reverse, and then you take it out of reverse into neutral. But if you try to force it, you buy another tray of plates. Okay. Okay, I've got a whole bunch of.
That's that slide I added just for Steve.
Okay, so this is drivetrain.
Yeah.
Well, there's a bell housing on the back of the engine. This is the bell housing which holds the transmission. Inside the bell housing is a flywheel, which is kinetic energy, basically, that once you get this heavy disc rotating, you've got a lot of kinetic energy. And on top of this flywheel is a vibration dampener. So the vibration dampener has a plate in the center with springs in it, so it tends to
mitigate some of the vibration, the natural vibration of the engine. So both of these, this bolts to this, and they're inside the bell housing. And they sit on the sprocket of the transmission. So this has teeth on it that fit right over the transmission. This is bolted to that. These gears, yeah, this is the flywheel. So once this starts, the engine starts turning this, there's a lot of kinetic energy here. And then it goes to through the transmission. This is where the shifting happens, right here. And this is the coupling. Coupling is the transition to the shaft. And this is where the pitch, these motor mounts are on an engine that's not level. It's pitched. It's pitched down because we're trying to draw a line from the back of the engine through the prop all the way out the boat, right? So it's at an angle. So this grabs the end of the shaft. This came off a little Z, and needless to say, we couldn't unscrew it. Yeah, we cut it off. But basically, you put feeler gauges, little thin pieces of metal here to make sure that the face of this and the face of this are meeting perfectly parallel, right?
No messed up, none of this.
Yeah, none of that. If they're not matched face to face, this will break because it won't be turning the way it should. You reduce a lot of the stress when you have it faced correctly. And we've done this recently. So then the shaft, this came off little Z, is in here, is in this coupling. Once that's done, then there's a packing gland. There's a rear tube, there's an aft tube of fiberglass through which the shaft comes onto the boat, right? It goes from, so this packing gland or stuffing box, whatever you want to call it, this part grabs that fiberglass tube.
It's called the shaft log.
Yeah, the stern tube. So this grabs the fiberglass tube, and this part up here grabs the fitting, this fitting. So the stuffing box basically is where you're trying to mitigate water coming through the aft tube onto the boat. And the way you do that is with flax. This is flax, or there's a graphite version. Yeah, graphite version. And you basically are putting 2 or 3 wraps here. And this nut is solid on one side, but it's meant to go over the packing on this side. So if I can hold this. So all you do, you're wrapping. It's very important to lubricate this stuff with this stuff, okay, with Centef. This is blue lubrication. So you take this stuff and you bathe it in this. Okay, so this is lubricated. Then you do one wrap and you cut it on the bias. So you're cutting an angle, right?
Look here.
And then when you do the second one, you cut it on an opposite bias, right? So if you cut it this way, then you cut it that way. But it's always on the bias. So then you do the third one.
Rings. You're making rings.
You're making rings.
3 rings.
3 rings, sometimes 2 rings. We just did Mistral, and it was 2 rings. Then this nut goes on here, and it grabs the fitting, and this is where you're gonna crush the flax. So the form factor of the flax is can't be reused, basically, because you're going to tighten it so much that you're squeezing it, and it's squeezing onto the shaft, but it's lubricated, right? And this is where, once you've crushed it enough, then there's a second bolt here that's a locking nut. And these wrenches, these are donated by Harry King, by the way. He brought these from the Air Force to the club. These are packing gland wrenches. One is for here, one is for here, but it's not the only wrenches you can use. And then once you crush it on there, and these straps here cannot be perforated straps. They need to be these kind of straps. You see how they got a ridge in them, but they don't go through. And the reason is these have to be really strong. There's 2 that grab the aft tube and 2 that grab the fitting. So there's 4 straps here. And this is where the water pressure is going to come in from the strut, from the tube, right? So you really want to put this in and strut, and if this is, when the engine's running, this is cooling this nut. And if it's dripping 1 to 5 drops per minute, it's pretty much perfect. You should be able to go down after you're running the engine, put your finger on this nut. It'll be warm, but it won't be so hot that you have to take it off. If it's too hot, there's not enough water going through, your cooling's not happening. We just changed it on Mistral because it was doing 15 plus drops per minute. And that's too much because now your bilge pump is working too hard. You're taking in water too much. So you really want to go 1 to 5 drips per minute. Your nut will be warm but not too hot, and you will be fine. And then we go down to, out of the boat, we go down to a strut. The strut is right there, and it is going to use a cutlass bearing. And a cutlass bearing goes inside that tube. Now the cutlass bearing has to be pushed in and destroyed when it comes out. It's a very tight fit. Yeah, and you can see the inside lubrication is mostly water, but with ribbed, it's ribbed. So there's not a lot of friction here because water is doing most of the work. And the strut should be 1 inch from the back of the prop. If it's more than 1 inch, you can get some of this going on, right? So the strut is to stabilize the rotation of the prop. Then there's the prop. Once you 1 inch from the back of the strut is the prop. The prop has a key in it and is tapered. So the end of this shaft is tapered. So when you put it on, it gets tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. Then you end up with threaded stock at the end, and what goes on is the castle nut. The castle nut goes on here, and it allows you to put, there's a hole in the threaded, allows you to put in a cotter pin and bury it into the castle part of the castle nut, so that no prop, once the nut's in place, it's not rotating, no matter what this does. Forward, reverse, it doesn't matter. You need to make sure you're locked on really well. So putting in the cutlass bearing can be tough, but one of our members came up with an easy tool, threaded stock, right? Put this through the strut, tighten this up, slowly compress and push this into the strut, and you've got a new cutlass bearing. Sometimes these are brass, sometimes they're composite material like this. So that gets you to the prop. The prop has to be matched to the engine. If the prop is wrong, you will lug the engine and destroy it. And so you've got to go to a prop shop, a real prop shop, There's a great one right by Ventura Harbor. Tell him all the specs on your engine. He'll tell you what prop is right for your boat. There's so many different motors and so many different boats.
Yep.
You got to get the right prop for the right boat.
Yep.
So that takes us. I want to talk about chemicals. First of all, one thing that will get us kicked out of marinas is fuel and oil in the water. So we want you to use bibs whenever you're fueling, right? And you've got something going and you're going to put this over the thing, before it, so that if you're spilling fuel, it's going to be in a bib, right? And you don't be afraid to use absorbent things, and if you see sheen on the water, we need to know right now, where's that sheen coming from? We also have a display over here about diapers in the bilge. Diapers in the bilge never lie. If they're yellow, you've got a coolant problem. If they're pink, you've got a fuel problem.
Diesel.
If they're black, you've got an oil problem. So diapers in the bilge, and also when it comes to cans, never put gasoline in yellow. Never put diesel fuel in red. This is always gasoline. This is always fuel.
Diesel.
Right? Then people say, well, how do you change the oil? Well, changing the oil sucks. And this is how it sucks. So the place that you would change the oil on this, there's a sump at the bottom, an oil pan. But what you do is you take a hose out of here and go all the way down. Where's the hose? Right. Yeah. So like this is just a plugged hose. So you put a plastic tube all the way down this tube into the bottom of the sump and suck it out. Right? So this is how we change the oil. You don't use it drain pan. You don't use this is how you get to the bottom of the sump, and this is how you pull all the dirty oil out. And how often do we change oil?
That's hers. That's that one. This is a pull out, the suck out oil tube, right?
No. Yeah.
Not all the boats have this. Not all the engines have this. That one still does, right?
Yeah, this has a hose that
Right there.
allows you to.
Sorellas has this. Goes down the bottom of the pan. Easy. Otherwise, you're trying to do it through the dipstick opening.
Yeah,
So
through the dipstick opening.
it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that comes with a long tube. There's two versions of this. There's a shorty and a tall one. And usually most boats can use a short version of this, because there isn't that much oil in them.
Steven, does most of the boats have a diapers in them? Can you find them?
Yeah, every bilge should have a diaper under the engine.
Well, under the engine he's talking about. When I think bilge, I think where the
water is.
Yeah.
There's a supply of them?
No, this is under the engine. We want diapers under the engine all the time.
Yep.
So that, because if something's coming down
from the engine,
if there's a leak in a clamp or a hose or something, it's going to go vertical, right? Under the engine is what you're always looking for.
Okay, so the diapers under the engine.
Diapers under the engine, always.
Always. You should see
always. And if it stays white, you're in good shape. If it goes pink, you got a problem.
The reason for it on the leak gates is all the compartment on the leak gates is a closed compartment, so to say. So if you have a leak of diesel fuel, it'll go on the leak gates. They won't want it into the bilge, because the bilge is not connected to right on the leak gates. That is a compartment, but it's the same if you have a leak from the shaft of the propeller.
Yeah.
That water will also be on the leak gates. It won't go into the bilge.
Actually, on some boats it will. Most of my boats are well.
On the motors of it are 38 footer.
Yeah.
They are built so they cannot run in the water from the bilge, cannot run into the bilge. Some people don't know exactly how this system is supposed to work. They might think if they have water on the propeller shaft going in to that compartment under the engine, or we should build a small hole so it runs down to the bilge, that way it will be pumped out. The whole reason that they have two different setups is because they don't want fuel to get into the bilge and then get pumped out automatically. So for instance, on the 38 footer, where we have to use different systems, if there's water underneath the engine, we have to use the suction pump, like a vacuum pump, and just pull it out and then pull it out overboard.
Yeah, you want your bilge to be white. If your bilge is black, you got a problem.
Or
You got
red,
a problem.
Yeah.
We've had smelly bilges, and you gotta make sure your holding tank's not leaking into the bilge. You know, your water tanks aren't leaking into the, you know, you really wanna monitor your bilge all the time. Next slide, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say, on all these things here, the thing that we need to do most regularly on our boat is adjusting the packing gland. Because they have, so they're not dripping too much. They naturally wear as the prop's spinning. And eventually, you can, when they start dripping too much, you tighten it. You drip too much, you tighten it. Drip too much, you tighten it. Eventually, you can't stop the drip. That's the time when you have to replace the packing material, right? On this slide, which you can look online and see it, I described that process. Good picture about how to cut them, and make sure you stagger your cuts so they don't give you a water path through them. But it just tells you how to do that.
You know, always take out the old packing, and sometimes that old packing can be really hard. So just use little picks like this. It'll come out in pieces.
Yep.
But take it out because it's not well lubricated. If you leave it in, the friction is going to be very high. The heat generation will be very high. So use these cheap little.
Whatever tool, you gotta pick it out the inside of that nut.
But we don't really check for packing glands and all that stuff.
We check for packing gland dripping all the time.
You have to.
The dripping, right?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't done it.
Everybody should.
You're always checking the bilge. You're checking the bilge before you take the boat out.
Yeah. Well, no, but I'm not sure. I don't think it's on the checklist to check packing gland.
It wasn't really trained.
Well, it should be running when you're checking. Meaning, once you're out there and you're running the engine, that's when you go down and see what kind of drip you're getting.
You know,
That isn't on the checklist.
for me, when I usually find out about it, it was from cruisers. Because guess what? They're out there at anchor, they want to sleep at night. If that packing gland is dripping like Mistral, 15 drips a minute, that bilge pump keeps going off all night long. I hear about it from the cruisers. Day shifters don't care.
Yeah. So we're not going to know until something like that.
And there's nothing wrong with it dripping too much other than it's going to keep cycling the bilge pump. It's not hurting anything. It's going to keep cycling the bilge pump.
One thing you want to make sure you know where the wrenches are to adjust it.
Oh,
yeah.
the ones that fit, the ones that fit the nut.
Yeah, you just really got to tighten it.
Mark bought his own set.
I have a set.
Mark bought his own set on the Sorella because he couldn't find the gloves.
These are Harry Canes from the Air Force.
How would you get to it?
I have some adjustable ones I keep on board Charm. They work, but if I need to get really tight on them, the adjustable ones don't tend to hold, but that's what I use. But so I have some on Charm, there's some on Sorella, there's some in a dock box in that green,
That's those two.
the green canvas bag.
Yeah, because that's
But you can't see it happen, right? Can you see the drip happen?
Of course, because you can see this. You can see this when you're down there checking the opening the through hole, checking the strainer. It's right there.
Oh, okay.
It's right there.
Oh, it's right there. Okay.
It's right there.
Does the frequency of the drip change when the shaft is rotating?
Yes, it does, and it also goes up in reverse because reverse, I guess, tends to
So
push
these
water
two wrenches are in the
down
dog
the
box.
Reverse is trying to push water in here, right?
Along with the stuff.
So it does, and you can adjust the drip rate at idle with no turning. As long as you get it down to 1 or 2 drips a minute, it's fine.
What's the maximum?
There's the loop.
There is no maximum. It's just how much you can tolerate those pump cycles. Oh yeah. You said that. You can't have no dripping.
except for dripless packing glands, which would be angel
Which
seed.
are different, those are
It's
baffles.
angel seed.
Yeah.
I think only angel seed. All the other boats. If there's no dripping, what's going to happen? The friction of that prop turning on that packing material is going to burn this stuff up. That's bad.
And you gotta be careful, because there's drip less and dripless.
Yeah.
And dripless, drips not at all. Drip less is a marketing term, which says we drip less than the other guy. But one of the things that when you're doing the bilge too, you gotta have a check valve. Because the bilge is an uphill pump, right? Because it comes out the transom, comes out the back. You want to have a check valve in that line so that when you pump it out, it's not all rushing back.
When the pump turns off.
Yeah, when the pump turns off. So make sure your check valve works. Otherwise, it's just going to start flowing back in again in the tube. So just check and make sure you got a check valve that's working.
Where do you check the check valve? I don't know where that is.
Check valve's in line with the tube that comes off the pump.
Off the pump. Oh,
Off the pump. The pump is trying to pump out to the transom, and when you shut it off, it's all rushing back because it's not. It's a pitch. The outlet on the transom is higher than the pump is. Right.
I think it's fair to say that a lot of this stuff is new to a lot of people, and it's good to be aware of it. But I wouldn't tackle it unless you're comfortable with doing it.
Of course, yeah.
Call
But
the
if you come to
boat
work
in. I'm
day
just
on
saying,
Friday.
yeah, I'm just saying that, you know, just because you've been
We'll
told,
teach
oh,
you.
adjust it, you know,
We'll
you
teach
might
you.
find
Fix it Friday. We do everything
Yeah,
on
they'll
Fix
teach
It
you.
Friday.
They'll teach you. Yeah.
All right, troubleshooting.
Or if nothing else, tell them, boat team, please.
Tell them.
Write it in the logbook, please.
Yeah, that's your pet peeve.
Or I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. They want to be, it's okay to say something's wrong, they'll have to be blamed. It's not right, you gotta do it.
Do we want to say anything about travelers?
You got time? Let me tell you.
Yeah.
All right. I want to put this slide in here. It's not there yet, but for all the travelers on the boats, you know what the travelers are,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That slide across these big rails, right?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? They need maintenance, and we don't do it. And what you're going to learn is that they're going to get, over time, they're going to get harder and harder to roll across this track. And it's only, I brought this for Sorella.
Can I please have that?
I brought this for Sorella, okay? It's just over time it happens. They're going to get dirty. You're going to get salt and dirt in there. And those travelers, which you look at that piece of paper, the picture's not up here, they are full of ball bearings.
And if you pull the car off, what happens?
All the ball bearings fall out.
They go all
They go all over the place. Okay, so that's why you pull it onto this.
But this actually, when you buy a new traveler, it comes installed on this, and you put it up against your boat traveler and push the car onto it so you don't lose any ball bearings. I saved that because it can be used, in my mind, to take that traveler off the boat where I can mess with it and clean the ball bearings.
Or lubricate the ball bearing.
Well, actually, they need to be cleaned first because they're full of
What do you
dirt
clean them
and
with?
crap. If you watch any video, like Harkin is a major manufacturer of these guys, they have a nice video online that tells you how to clean them. Number one is, as this says, and I'll get it on the slideshow for the next time you look at it. Number one is you can do it in place. And what they suggest you do is, of course, loosen the lines, put the travel over, use acetone to clean all the crap out of this track it's trying to roll on. All the dirt, salt buildup, blah, 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 blah. Get your track clean. Move the travel over here. Do this side. Get it clean first. Number two is to try to help get the dirt and crud and salt out of your ball bearings. They say use a dishwasher, dish soap solution like Dawn. Put it on the track. Roll that traveler over, back and forth, back. More soap, more roll it. Get those bearings coated. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, over and over and over and over. Then get a hose, water hose. Squirt the heck out of those ball bearings while you're doing this. Get all that soap out of there. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
You can do this while it's in place?
While it's in place.
All right.
Look at the video, Harkin video. And then you got to try to dry it. So travel over, try to get all the water off. They use paper towels. Back and forth, back. I think
compressed air, it works really good for getting the air out of the ball bearings. Anyway, and when you're finally done with that, the last thing is, this is McLube 1 drop, it's called. They literally meant that I put a drop, roll that traveler back over that drop, and get that oil spread on the bearings. Now the video shows them using more than 1 drop. And you put the drop with the ball bearings you're rolling, which is here. Back and forth. So 1, get it clean. Number 2, lubricate it. You're done.
You can do it without taking the car off.
Or yes, and that's what you have to do. Or to really do it, you can take the car off. Once the car is off, and you get it somewhere where the ball bearings aren't going to fall in the water. A lot of them have a couple of bolts you can take off, take a panel off, and there's your ball bearings. You can just look at them. You can take them out, clean them, and put them back in if you don't drop them.
You can also inspect them and make sure they're right.
Yes, and that's how you would replace them.
Right.
Because you can replace the ball bearings too. Okay. Look at Harkin online.
But they usually don't need replacement. They need lubrication.
I think you can do it in place. Mark, clean it.
Well, that's shot full of water. I haven't used Dawn soap, but.
But you can use compressed air in a can, right?
I'm thinking right now, they just showed trying to dry the track completely with paper towels and then rolling the thing back and forth and getting that water off. They would just back and forth and back and forth. And this is Harkin doing it. But.
We'll be the only boats around that have these raw water sensors. We've got like 6 people making the printed circuit boards, thanks to Jeff's design.
And Brian's already made them.
So the raw water alarms, are they going to flash or just turn on? The raw water alarm. Does it flash?
If you go back several times, remember our boats? Where's the picture of Sorella's panel? Keep going, keep going. Back one. All right. All of our boats on their ignition panels. Now go back up one more. This is a Catalina 30. There's the alarm buzzer we all hear, right? There's the lights. This light turns on when the engine high temperature alarm is going off. This one turns on when the oil pressure alarm is going off. They both sound the same buzzing alarm. Go back down to charms. On charms, here's her buzzer over here.
Can you hear that above an engine?
Huh?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? They're all up here. All of those. They're up here. Wait, I'm not done yet.
Okay.
Charms has the third one added for the raw water flow alarm, right? These are actually pretty loud. These types are pretty loud. Some of the
boats flash.
They turn on. The alarm is what gets your attention, and what I described here, actually I'm going to describe it later, as I say, when you hear that alarm go off, number 1 is, look here and see which alarm it is. If it's high temperature, well, this thing's probably pig. If it's low water flow, look out the back real quick. Is there any flow coming out at all? Shut down the engine. Low oil pressure, if you have a oil pressure gauge, obviously check that first, then shut down, then go check the oil level. I describe that later in troubleshooting.
But Dave on Islandside is putting in a flashing alarm.
Yeah.
So when it turns red, it's flashing.
No, actually, what Dave is doing is he's replacing these lights with light, the combination of a light and a buzzer.
Right.
Right? And I looked at those years ago.
And it flashes.
Right.
Well,
it goes on and off, on and off.
I guess but you know what? The flashing doesn't.
If it's in your peripheral vision.
The flashing doesn't get your attention. That is what gets your attention. It doesn't the loud alarm. Flashing you don't see. You hear that. My opinion.
Okay. If it's in your peripheral vision and there's a red light flashing, that'll get my attention.
I think they're brighter than what these original ones are. The one I put in for the flow alarm, brighter anyway. So anyway, these are located down by the engine, right?
Right.
The alarm module is inside here. The lights are here.
So there's a little box that the PC that the printed circuit board.
That's inside here.
Okay.
Okay, let's get back.
All right.
Yeah, troubleshoot. Electrical systems, batteries, connections, the sensors, cooling system, raw water flow, coolant leak, thermostat, okay. Fuel system, contamination, filters, lift pumps, okay. Mechanical, the injectors, the mounts, the cables, keep going. All right, troubleshooting. This is what you wanted. One, engine does not turn over. What could it be? Is the Perco off? You got no power, okay. Low batteries, possible. Starter solenoid failed. That happens many times actually, right? Over the years. No power to your ignition panel. Remember, if your ignition panel doesn't have any power, that's where the starter switch is. Remember that 20 amp breaker mounted on the side of the engine? If that popped, that's what sends power to your ignition panel. So if you got no power in your ignition panel, you can't do anything. Your gauges can't go on, nothing can go on. Alarms can't go on. Maybe that breaker popped. All right? Okay, the engine turns, but it won't start. Well, fuel pump is a common one. Fuel pump's not working. The lift pump, right? Glow plug's not functioning. Okay? Glow plugs help start a cold engine. Most engines will eventually start without glow plug. That's an iffy, but yeah. Fuel filter clogged. No, obviously that means fuel starvation. Air and fuel system, that'll do it every time. Leave the air out. Is your fuel cutoff lever pulled? Well, can't start with no fuel. Check that. Is your fuel tank empty? No fuel again, right? So we're talking fuel. It'll turn, but it won't start. A fuel problem, air in the fuel lines, no glow plug. That's usually one of those things. And note, this is one of the first who you asked about the aqua lift.
Me.
He did. Note, if you're cranking and cranking and cranking, but it won't start. You covered this? No, you didn't. A little bit. The aqua lift.
It's full of water.
Yeah, the aqua lift muffler, if you're not careful, if you the whole time you're cranking and the engine's not starting, as you're cranking, the raw water pump is cranking and it's pumping raw water into the muffler. This is how it works, and that muffler is slowly filling up with seawater. Well, that muffler is also hooked up to that big exhaust line. If that muffler fills up with seawater and keeps going, some of it's going to try to go over the exhaust outlet, but if that boat were to heel, that seawater could go back into the engine. That will destroy an engine. It will destroy it. You get salt water in the engine.
No more than 30 seconds of cranking.
No more than 30 seconds. All the aqua lift mufflers have a drain on the bottom, just for this reason.
The 380s don't.
What?
The 380s don't have that.
Don't have what? Okay, but they probably have on the exhaust line, this exhaust line coming out of this engine that goes down to the muffler. Don't they have a line that does this? Just for that reason? A line that goes up, exhaust down. A lot of folks, they put that in there to mitigate this problem too.
The aqua lift and the operation are covered in all the boat videos, by the way.
Yes, and in the boat manual. But anyway, the rule is, and she doesn't have a way to drain it. Actually, her aqua lift is pretty small. Hers is pretty small, right?
I think Mike was reading about that, and he said just disconnect the exhaust hose and drain it out.
Well, check and see if I'm right. On the engine exhaust, has this riser, and that means when that boat heels, it's not just going to go right back into that engine. It's going to have to get up there, and that can mitigate the problem. Can mitigate, can mitigate.
There's an elbow that comes up like this.
Yeah, like that one doesn't have. Yeah. But rule of thumb is if that aqua lift has a drain, which most of our boats do, if you crank for 30 seconds, don't start. Just get the water out of the aqua lift and keep going.
Isn't 30 seconds an awful long time?
I think so.
I mean, if you're cranking for 6 seconds.
Yeah.
We're talking about filling the aqua lift.
Yeah.
30 seconds to fill the aqua
lift. To fill it.
Yeah, but
so there could be 2 or 3 instances of not starting, and 15 seconds of one try, and 15 seconds of another try.
Too, all that time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, I wouldn't do that either.
That's total 30 seconds. Cumulative.
If I look in the engine manuals, they're all going to say somewhere around 20 seconds, 30 seconds. They're all going to say the same thing. Yeah.
And the key to troubleshooting is sequence, right? where do I start that it works? What's next in the sequence? Does that work, right? So there's a mindset. That's why Freedom's so good at this stuff. He breaks everything down to little pieces. This works, this doesn't work. He finds the problem really fast. So you have to think troubleshooting, what works,
Like an engineer.
where does it stop working?
Yeah.
Like an engineer.
Right.
Exactly.
I can always figure it out. I can always make it better.
It doesn't come easy to some people, troubleshooting. It's like, I'm stuck, right?
Yeah.
This doesn't work, I'm stuck. I don't have a
know
sequence.
what else to do.
So maybe
Yeah.
this will give you a sequence of, well, this works, but this doesn't work. So
Yeah.
what's in between,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. All right. Engine turns too slow to start. When our car does that, we know what it is. It's the battery, right? Well, it could be on your boat too. Cranking battery too low. Try switching to all to kick in both sets of batteries to see if that'll get you started. Verify the transmission is neutral, because if you are in gear, that puts more of a load on trying to start the engine. That might help. And worst case is those engine compression release levers that Dennis talked about. Not all of our boats have them, and this is a common problem for the cruisers. Unfortunately, they're out there at the islands for a week. They run the batteries down quite a bit, and oops, we also ran down the cranking battery. Oh shoot. Well, with how much compression we're talking about in these diesels?
70 or 20.
They are really hard to crank, these diesel engines. It takes a lot of starter power to crank a diesel over with that kind of compression. And that battery is really
450 amps.
struggling to crank that diesel over. Well, if the boat has compression release levers on it, guess what? That removes the compression. When those are open, I can turn it by hand.
Turn what by hand?
The crank, the engine. Okay, I can turn it by hand. Matter of fact, some of them come with a crank just for this reason. Open those up and crank it. Get it spinning, slap your levers closed and start it. So what you can do is open those levers. Now your low battery should be able to turn it way faster. And the idea is you open those up with your low batteries, crank it, get it spinning, and while you're cranking and spinning, shut those levers and it should start. And start charging your batteries.
Yeah, if you remember rolling a car downhill, put it in gear, boom, it starts. Same time.
Oh yeah. Can't do that anymore.
No. Stick shift.
The old days.
Stick shift was
The old days you could. No, well, all the old cars. Yeah, before electronic ignition came around. Fuel injection. Yeah, good old days. All right, engine runs, but there's no water from the exhaust. And we all know what that means. Stop the engine. And I'm just added the raw water flow alarms will come on in that case. Your engine's running, and you see no water coming out. Well, the through-hole valve's not open. Maybe the impeller on the raw water pump is bad. Maybe the raw water pump itself is not spinning because the keyway or the shaft is broken or the belt's broken. Or there's a blockage in your water system somewhere, whether all the way at the input or somewhere. These are things you have to look at.
And every boat will have fins, snorkel, mast.
Yeah, I cover that in a moment.
Yeah, you gotta
I cover
go
that
in,
in a
you gotta
moment.
go in.
What good is a snorkel gonna do when you're down below?
Nothing. Nothing.
You can't have the swim go down.
Yeah.
Just to get air and go down.
Yeah. I don't think I put a snorkel on Charm, but she's got the mask and the fins because, unfortunately, occasionally you need them.
You have the snorkel in the hole for the through ball and blow hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Blow it out.
By the way, I've got another trick coming up too. I'll show you. All right. The engine runs at idle, but sputters and dies at higher RPMs, Sorella. She just had that problem last week.
Yeah.
She could idle fine, but they tried to go and she just
Ask it for more fuel.
all right. Those symptoms were she can idle, so the engine's okay. It's running fine at idle, running smooth at idle. But when you demand more fuel, she can't do it. there's a fuel restriction somewhere, right? Fuel filter is probably clogged, which was her case. You got fuel blockage somewhere, or having air in the fuel system could actually cause that, though I would think if you had that much air in the fuel system, it wouldn't even run well at idle.
And eventually that air will get out.
Right. The engine runs rough. All right. Fuel filter clogged, idle speed too low, that can do it. Sometimes our idle adjustments get misadjusted and you can slow the engine down too much. That'll make it run really rough. Fuel contamination. You got crap in your fuel. Dirty or faulty injectors can cause that.
How does air get into the fuel system?
Usually from stuff that we're doing, anytime we take apart anything in the fuel system, with routine maintenance is changing fuel filters. We always introduce air doing that. Cleaning the rate core, we always introduce air doing that. But anytime you do that, you should bleed your system first with the bleed screws we talked about before you start the engine. Not after you try, because now you're pumping air into the injectors, and that's not good. But that's usually, or you have a leak in your fuel lines, right? That can suck air in, right? Next. For all these things we just talked about, I put that list together because they were like the most common ones that we all run into. The next several slides are showing you troubleshooting matrices that are in the various boat manuals that cover everything we just talked about and a heck of a lot more. And they're all on board the boats.
But this is a good way to develop sequencing.
It is. All of them are. This is one from, it doesn't say which engine it is, anyway. And for some reason, this is from the original slide set from 2019. They circled black smoke, overload, rope in the propeller. So black smoke is saying the engine's running, but apparently it's struggling, and you got black smoke coming out, so they're calling that an overload condition, like rope in the propeller could do that. So this is just, again, this is one, all the boats have these on board in their manual. That manual has one of these in it, okay? And it talks about all these common things you can do. If you're out there, you don't have this presentation with you, look in there, because they've all got something. What's the next one? Actually, this is that's an extension of that one. Backflow, smoke, different things to look for, rope around the propeller. Overload could be caused by a rope around the propeller, oversized propeller, which that should be the case because our boats have a propeller change. Anyway, again, these are all in the boat manuals. About this one is specifically for engine cranks but won't fire. And I outlined my normal ones in the front already. There are some more ideas what you can look at. What's next? This is from Charm's manual. And there's, you look at all these things and all these possible problems and all the causes are, the majority of the causes have to do with injector problems, valve problems, engine problems that you can't deal with. I can't deal with without the right tools and stuff. Stuff you can't do out at sea. But a lot of them talk about what my first list talked about, the things you can look at and find, things you know about. But these are all on board the boat, is my point. They're there. So if you're out there, stuck out there, open the book. Can't hurt.
If you call for a tow, you got 4 hours to study the book. And if they come out and touch your breaker and reset your breaker and now everything works, shouldn't have called for a tow.
Here,
right, you pay for it.
Steve, you wanted blue smoke?
Blue smoke.
Orange outfit? Right?
Yeah, but these diesel engines are capable of many hours, right? Thousands of hours.
Piston blow by? So that's saying you're burning oil. Blue smoke, you're burning oil. So that's inside the engine. Okay?
White smoke?
White smoke. Air and fuel line, dirty fuel, piston blow by, dry cylinder walls, valve blow by.
Wow.
Got lots of them. Look at this. Decompression levers are on, or they're sticking. Preheat device inoperative.
White sounds terrible.
Yeah. All right, forward about 3 slides.
So you need sequencing, you got matrices.
All right.
White is usually water.
White. Actually, if you're burning water, yep, it didn't say that. On that chart, it didn't say that.
You heated it up, it went to steam.
Yeah,
That's what
no, of course.
white is.
That means I'm burning water in my fuel. I'll bet I'm running pretty rough too.
Not burning in fuel, it's usually coming off the aqua. You got water in there,
Yeah.
you heat the water up, and
Yeah.
if you heat it up far enough, it's gonna come out of steam.
Huh. Well, that should be normal because our aqua lift always has hot exhaust gas pushing out water.
Not hot enough for steam.
Oh yeah. So we're overheated.
Not necessarily.
Well, but that would do it too. Hot. Yeah.
It's sad, huh?
Old style. Oh, this is Freedom 2. Freedom 2, if you remember Freedom 2, she did not have a closed freshwater cooling system. It actually pumped raw seawater through the engine to cool the engine. Right?
Yeah.
But we don't have her anymore. But fortunately. I think. At least as far as the engine goes anyway. Yeah. But so
The reason we figured is why that boat didn't have it, because it was probably sold as a lake boat. You don't need it in a lake.
yeah. And you got salt. You don't have that corrosive salt.
Yeah.
And versus a closed cycle cooling system, like all of our inboards have now. Yeah. Just like a car has, closed system. Raw water flows through a heat exchanger, uses rubber impellers, uses antifreeze mixture and has thermostat, oil overflow reservoir just like a car, temperature sensor just like a car, temperature over alarm, yeah. And they say, they had note here, you can use that infrared temperature sensor if you really want to see how hot your engine is. Well, the gauge says it's way up here, and we use that a lot of times. Say, well, how hot is that really? We have a couple of those in the club in our dock boxes if you wanted to really measure your engine temperature. Next one.
Where's your new invention? I think that.
And
where on that chart would the raw water sensor?
well, on mine, since you brought it up, I'm measuring raw water flow only. I want to tell you when something's happened with the raw water flow before the engine overheats, right? So it has to be in the raw water line, which is here, coming in through the valve or through hole, the strainer, the engine's raw water pump, the heat exchanger, and then it goes out, mixes with the exhaust, or actually most of our boats, when it comes out of the heat exchanger, I think all of our boats, we go up through an anti-siphon valve first, and it comes back down, and that is another protection device so that we can't suck water back into the engine. If it does, it'll pull air in instead. They all have that anti-siphon valve. This doesn't show that. But, alright, so, where to put mine? Okay. It has to be in, if it's on the intake, I would put it after the strainer because I don't want crap and crud getting inside my flow sensor. I want it strained out first. And this is mounted on the engine, so I had to put it there. That's one place, on the engine raw water intake. The other place I could put it is on the engine raw water output. And which I've done that on, that's where Charms is. That's where some of them are going to go now. That's all, one place or the other. But this doesn't show you elevations of things. I have instructions for how to install it. You've been around the people, there's instructions over there too. What I learned the hard way, like Mark 3's on that line going up to the anti-siphon, comes back down. I put it in there because it was convenient, but what I learned the hard way was every time you stop the engine, it pulls air in, and that sensor is now in air. This thing is all stainless steel, and it turns out going from having it submerged in seawater, and then having it in air, and back to seawater, and back to air, and back to seawater, and back to air promotes corrosion. It's much happier being in seawater, keep me away from air. It's much happier, corrosion takes way longer to develop. So I need to move it, and I'm going to move it probably here. Because these are really low. That was a high point was my problem. Basically what I learned was, wherever the heat exchanger is on the engine, wherever that heat exchanger is, keep it below the heat exchanger. That's all. Because below the heat exchanger is always going to be full of water. That's all. So, one of those two places. Next. Raw water pumps. This is from the old slideshow. Just showing the basic pieces. The only thing we usually play with or have to deal with is our impellers as they wear out. Two different types of pumps on different types of engines. So there's all the pieces. When you buy rebuild kits, you can rebuild these things, all these pieces. But usually we only deal with the impellers and having to check them and replace them when necessary. What else? What else?
Rebuilding them is worth it.
Yeah, I've heard that rebuilding them, the problem is, and this was on, that was on Charm. I had to replace Charm. And the Yanmar part, they're expensive to buy from Yanmar, like you said. Well, I couldn't go to Kabuto and buy it because it's the wrong company. Couldn't get a tractor one. But they said, yeah, I've got rebuild kits, but generally, if your pump is now leaking, if it's worn out enough to be leaking, odds are the shaft has been compromised. Yep. The rebuild kit does not include a whole other shaft. He said, so I bought a new pump, a couple $100, and it's fine. But Dave's skills cat said, I want to rebuild it. So he has it now, he's going to rebuild it. All right, diesel fuel tank, where are we at? Fuel inlet from the deck fill, right? Fuel for the valve, you shut it off, fuel going to the engine, fuel returned back from the engine, electronic wire, where's the vent? Where's the vent? No, here's the vent in the back, going out. This one has a big inspection port. You can open up, take off, and look in there, clean the fuel tank. Look how full, is there any fuel in there? Anyway. Inspection plate for access, okay. Vent line moisture trap, that one, right? Vent line moisture trap. What's moisture trap mean?
Vent line is the same as on here.
What's moisture trap mean?
Keeps moisture from getting in your tank.
Well, but the vent line's like grew up, like these. I don't know what that means right there. Sorry, that.
Is that condensate?
Well,
condensate?
fuel tanks naturally condense inside. They're enclosed, It's just they're exposed to the air and stuff, and it's just naturally that's where the water comes from in them, right? It's condensation, really, or you poured water in them,
right.
But usually it's from condensation that builds up over time. This happens. Grounding cable, good idea. Anyway.
So if you suspect the fuel gauge isn't working,
well, we talked
you're
about
out,
that
you
when
can
you
get
pull. Actually, that's going to come.
it's coming up.
I think so. Yeah, it's coming up. It's coming up.
All right.
But you can measure them. You can measure them. That's what Mark needs to do, right? Mark needs to measure his fuel sender
We did it.
to see if it's
Yeah,
working.
already.
Did you already?
Yeah, we did it already. We changed the fuel gauge and it works great.
Which
The old
what?
fuel gauge, the whole rotation of the float, moved the gauge 1/8 of an inch. We
Yeah.
put the new gauge in.
Yeah.
Went
Okay.
from empty
But
to
you
full.
check the sender, and
Yeah,
the
we
sender,
checked the sender,
the sender's.
and it had the right ohms,
Yeah. There you go.
high ohms, full.
Is it high or low?
It was 13.
And
It was
two
52.
something.
So the
Should be 200.
200.
250, actually.
Yeah.
I have a question about the fuel
It worked
gauge.
great.
Yep.
It's fixed.
I know one thing in boat harbors has been an issue is fuel gauges not working, being stuck out in the ocean somewhere. It
Yeah.
happened to me.
Yeah.
And are fuel gauges supposed to be like replaced every year, every 2
No,
years?
no. They should last for decades. They should, unless something happens to them. And when you say a fuel gauge isn't working again, there's 3 parts to the whole fuel gauge system. The fuel gauge itself, the fuel sender that's sending it the signal to tell you how full the tank is, and the wiring in between.
Yeah.
The problem could be anywhere, including in the wiring, especially bad grounds. That does it every time.
Oh, really?
Every time. Yep. So it's one of the 3.
But you
It's
can,
not
you
running
can
low
manually
on the
inspect it, that's what I was
Well,
trying to
yeah,
say.
I talk about that a little later, I think, but we talked about you can actually pull the sender out of the tank and you can actually measure it, put an ohm meter across it, and it should vary from about 33 ohms to 250 ohms. And not have a bunch of skips, nothing more than, anyway. You can actually check it. Now on the fuel gauge, if you have a resistance device, you can actually, where the fuel gauge hooked up, still sender hooked up to it, 30 ohms, what do you read? 50 ohms, 100 ohms, what do you read? You can check it if you wanted to, if you have the pieces to do that with. And then buzzing out the wiring to see if that's a problem. Is the ground a solid ground from the fuel tank to that thing?
Is there any recommendations from Catalina to do any changes on a hourly basis? After 500 hours, you change this
On
out?
gauges?
Yeah.
Not that I know.
Gauges.
Not on gauges. Not that I
On
know.
gauges.
No. Or the senders. You know, senders are a moving part. They're moving.
What?
Senders are a moving part. They move. Anything that moves wears. Okay. Gauges, you can say, well, they're moving, but that's actually a needle being deflected. It's not a lot of. This is wear. That's it.
The resistor will stop working.
My first suspect in anything is what's wearing. There it is. Here's the slide I wanted. Thank you. Typically, 33 ohms to 220 ohms, roughly. Typical. And I thought that when the slopes were all the way up, full tank, it was low, and when they're all the way down, it was high. I might have that backwards, but
Yeah, I think it's,
okay.
that's full, that's empty.
Okay. And the gauge knows that. But, again, the wires going up there, especially on these 20-year-old boats, you know. Plus, you can see the wires have been changed 3 or 4 times. It's like, anyway.
Yeah, we've got a situation on little Z right now where the wire connection is good here. Connection's good here, but it's rubbing in between, and the cable has been worn. So just because your connectors are good doesn't mean the wire's good.
Yeah.
You've got an open somewhere, or
Well, the only way to check wiring is to go point to point with a meter.
see if you got continuity.
Am I 0 ohms or not? Yeah.
So
It's the only way I can do it. Different types of senders, and the newer ones that are out now. This one is interesting. It's kind of like the newer ones. This is just a float. This is a resistive wire, and the float's making bridges across that wire. So on this one, when that bridges across here, it's going to be 0 ohms with full speed. And when it's going down here, it's the most resistance going up there. On Charms, which is a newer one, doesn't have this outside canister. It actually has a float, but this float has magnets in it. And inside this tube are little reed switches. So as it's going up and down the tube, it's closing switches. That's the newer one. Anyway, same concept though. As you close the switch, it's within 200 ohms, 150 ohms. Anyway, but the senders, they're moving parts. They're going to wear over time. We replace them all the time. I mean, every year we're replacing one.
So you don't know. You don't know until it's gone to replace it.
Oh, you first start seeing something wrong with the fuel gauge. That's always the first thing you see, right? It's not reading right. It's reading high. It's reading low. It's not changing. It's pegged high. It's pegged low, right?
if
One
it
of those
stays
things.
at F, that's what
Yeah,
happened.
yeah. It's pegged high. It's pegged low.
It stayed full.
Yeah.
And we ran it dry.
Right, when you
Yeah,
get on a
right.
boat,
Well, you don't know. So we take it out. We're taking the boat once a week or once a month or whatever. We don't know what the gauge really is saying or not. When it's full, we think it's full, but it's not.
The log sheets.
Yeah.
Who's
Yeah.
last time it was
Oh,
full?
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at that, hey, the last, hey, look at that. The last 50 hours it's been full.
50 hours.
Huh.
Nobody put gas in. Something's wrong. It can't be true.
And usually, if it's pegged hard, empty, it's a wiring problem. The gauge has got no input. Or if it's a short, it pegs the other way. The gauge pegs the other way. If there's a short in the wiring. Okay? Pegged, one way or the other. It's a
Yeah,
wiring.
but saying full, you've got power.
Yeah.
That's all it
You do
tells.
have power if it says full.
But is it telling you what the sender's telling you? The resistor's got to be in there.
You're going for a long day, Bill.
Well, this one says, okay, don't oil stain on the absorber. Yeah, there's a lot of oil down there. You got oil leak. This is old slide. We also have an optical tachometer, right? You can put a reflective strip on your crank, and actually use our optical tach to tell you what the RPMs are, compare that to your tachometer. If you think something's off. Especially if the tachometer is reading 1/2 or twice the real speed, and it's probably set for the wrong alternator. So anyway, that's what that slide's about. Oh, that's a 380. Is that's Big Z?
Yeah.
No, that's Wojo.
Mojo.
That's Wojo. Wait, yeah, Wojo in 2019? When did you get Wojo?
21.
No, when did we get Wojo?
Oh.
No, this is a good one.
No.
2018.
Bleeding the fuel system? All right. You talked about bleeding the fuel system right where the fuel filter is. Right there. Wait, where's he showing? Where's the tan going? Well, whatever. So right where the, and that's on that engine. Not on that engine, not that one, but this is that lift pump we talked about, which only the Yanmar's have that. This is a fuel filter. You can unscrew this and change the fuel element every 250 hours. There is a bleed screw on top of that, and you can pump. You can open up that bleed screw, like when you just change the filter and there's still air in there. Open the bleed screw, pump, get all the air out until it's only pure fuel coming out. Close it. So now you're not going to introduce that air into your fuel injectors. Or past this guy, go up to the fuel injection pump, which is where I always go. There's always a bleed screw right above where the fuel line comes in. You can open up that bleed screw, pump the fuel, get all the air out of the whole system. You get it all out, and only fuel's coming out. Close that screw, and you got your air out. And that one is talking about putting it at the injector, so I've never done that. If it gets past the pump,
And you're pumping it manually?
huh? Well, yeah, you don't want to run the engine. And either you can turn on, this is a manual lift pump, and in my experience, these are lift pumps, I have a hell of a time getting very much pump action out of it. The rate core is the easiest pump mechanism. That, because it actually pumps.
Okay.
And they've all got them. Just get somebody to pump that while you're bleeding. That's the best way to do it. You can turn the electric fuel lift pump on if you want, and I also turn the glow plugs on. I just use that.
So if the air is at the injector, will that manual pump help?
Absolutely. Any pump that's pumping fuel through the whole system, and they all are.
So if the air is at the injector, that means the manual pump you can pump through the high pressure pump.
Yeah, you can pump fuel through the pump, right?
Not with that one you're talking about.
Actually,
What you do
wait, I like that. Because I can't pump back here and get fuel on every injector line. Actually, no.
Yeah, if you do what he's doing.
Yeah. What's he doing?
He's loosening the injector line for the pump.
That's at the injectors.
And that will have, you'll be able to get fuel out of there if you're not on one and it's being told to inject.
Yeah.
In other words, that line, all
Yeah.
four of those, or three of those,
Yeah.
whichever.
Sounds like you have to have the engine running to do that.
Yeah,
You do, right?
Yeah.
For that one?
but you can have it cranking also to do it.
Oh, cranking. You're right.
Yeah, that's what I
Cranking.
thought.
Yeah.
The manual one,
Thank
I
you.
don't think the manual
Yeah.
one will work.
Well, like I said, I've never done these. I always do it back here, and I've never had a problem. Once I get the air out up to here, I've never had a problem.
The manual will get it up to the pump.
Yeah, to the pump. But this is at the injector.
That's at the injector,
This is the
because
pump.
if you've got air in there, what you've got to do is you've got to bleed it from there.
Yeah, I get
And
yeah.
you can only bleed it, this pump is saying, I'm not firing that one, I'm
Right,
firing this one
right,
over here.
right.
But you can't get this one.
So you have to be cranky.
So you've got to be cranking
Yeah.
or running.
Yeah.
Then you change one injector.
Yeah.
You can run it.
Like I say, fortunately for me, and I've done a lot of bleeding, as long as I get the air out up to the injector input, I've never had a problem starting the engine.
Oh, I
Have you?
bleed.
Have you had to go to that distance?
Yeah, I go there a long time.
Because this didn't work.
No, because it didn't get to one of the injectors.
Okay. Bleeding. Yeah. What we got? Oh, the cables. Sure. Throttle cable's not working. Well, how come I do this and the engine's not going faster or slower? Well, how come when I move the shift forward and reverse, nothing's happening? Well, probably where they connect to the engine. Probably. Shift lever on the tranny, okay? Too bad that doesn't go back far, sir. Because this piece is mounted to a bracket right here that holds this guy still. So when this goes back and forth, they can move that lever. If this comes off, and by the way, you just pop these up, you can't shift anymore. If this comes loose, then this whole thing is trying, this guy is trying to move independent of him. Either one of those could cause a shifting problem. Something back where the cables are at the tranny. Or of course, up where your shift lever is, up in your binnacle, it could be a problem inside there. Same with the throttle. This is a throttle and shut off. Same thing here. If these guys let go, if that guy lets go, then this whole thing is moving now, and it's not, you kind of lose your ability to shift.
The shut off is the red buttons there?
What?
The shut off?
I think this one, this is the shut off.
Just stop.
To stop. This is the throttle for the engine. Yeah. But again, if these brackets come loose here or come off, you'll lose the ability for those to work. Or if this pops off of here, this can just pop off. There's a little snap-on thing. You're going to lose that ability. If the cable breaks, you're going to lose the ability. But
these are duplex cables, and you know when they leave the binnacle, they go aft to the transom and they do a big loop, right? They end up going back to the engine, right? Sometimes those loops are positioned in such a way that when you push them at the binnacle, they're twerking on you. They're not sliding inside.
Yeah. Well,
so they have to be mounted so that they don't twist up.
You're talking about capturing the outer sheaths so the inner cables can move independent. If the outer sheath isn't captured on both ends, that will happen.
With an easy loop so that it can push in and out.
Well, there's an emergency shut-off valve for the gas, for the diesel right there, right? Emergency
That's your pull to stop handle.
No, but actually the engine compartment too, that you can shut it off the gas, right?
No, that I know of. This is the pull to stop. When you up the pull to stop, right?
Stops fuel.
It stops the fuel. That's the only stop we have.
Oh, I thought there was a button too you could do it. I think
The Beta 20 on Mark III only has a button. Okay, she's the only one that has a stop button. But that stop button is energizing a solenoid on the engine to pull this down. But also, if that doesn't work on Mark III, you can go down to the engine, pull the cover off, you can see this lever, it's marked as a stop, and you can manually push it down on Mark III. Because she has to push to stop. All of the other boats have the pull to stop handle, right?
Charm has.
Charm is pull to stop handle.
Okay.
I know, whereas in Marine Del Rey had a button you could stop.
Right. Well, we have one, Mark III.
Which is Beta 20,
the
which
Beta.
has a great reputation.
Yeah.
The reviews are wonderful with Beta 20.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
So we're excited to have one. We don't know of many boats that do have one.
But maybe also to answer your question, if the pull stop handle isn't working, you can come down here and do it manually. You could, because it's right there. But there'd be something wrong with this cable, though, right? Why this handle's not working. And to your point about the cables being routed all to the binnacle and doing all this stuff, the tighter those get bent, the harder it gets to move those controls, right?
Big curve.
It's the bigger route we make. Sometimes we don't have a choice because it's a sailboat.
Sometimes they're too long too.
Well, then you got to put the excess somewhere.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
They get out of adjustment, so it's a good note if you find it to be hard to pull off.
Well,
these
are the adjustments. If you can go into forward and you can't go into reverse, and maybe your trans adjustment has gotten off, right?
Slipped or something.
Yeah, it's slipped, and you have to readjust that because you want when you can pop this off, manually put the transmission in neutral, put your handle up above in neutral. Well, are they lined up? If this thing's down here, it's misadjusted. It's not going to be pushing that way well enough. It's going to pull back this way. more than enough, right? But they can get this adjusted. This is the adjustment for how to adjust that, and which we do all the time. And this is the same one for the throttle, same one for the shut off right there. Adjustments.
We replaced Sorello's cables 2 years ago because they were vital.
Next
time.
We replace them all eventually. Because they're a moving part. They wear out. But of course, the handles and the binnacle, those things are wearing out too. I've had to replace pieces in there too. Moving parts. Hey, look at that. There's one of the aqua lifts. Yay! And there's the old one. Well, that looks like this is a 30, Callian 30, like Sorella or a Mark III's old one. Anyway, aqua lift mufflers. Okay. Doesn't show the drain, but there's the drain. There's the drain. Exhaust gases force the water out. When it's cranked without starting, water can back up. Then we say after 30 seconds of cranking without starting, just go down there and drain them. And then keep cranking, I guess, as long as you got battery power. But if he's not starting, there's probably a different problem anyway. But just don't keep cranking without draining the aqua lift, or you risk getting water back up into the engine. Bad thing. Compression release levers, which not all the boats have. That one does. It looks like this one. The Yanmars look like this. 3-cylinder engine, 3 levers.
That's on the video.
Yeah. You might hold it up too.
Sorry, when do we use the compression release lever?
That's the only time you should ever have to do that is when you don't have enough battery power to start your engine. You ran your batteries down. You're screwed. You're out in a harbor somewhere or in the middle of the ocean and you can't, there's not enough battery energy left to crank. So on these guys, on the Yanmars, you push all 3 of these back and they will latch back. And then that takes all the compression off, so you're really low battery. You can now spin the engine by hand, literally. Go ahead and crank, get it spinning as fast as you can, and while you're cranking and spinning, slap these all closed, and you should start. On that one, it's a single lever, is turning a rod, I think, and I think that one you have to hold this, get someone to crank for you, and then let it go. Same thing though. You only see that, it's just, we've done this, we've had to do this on cruises when we've gotten stuck out there. And it worked. Not all boats have it though.
I'm really serious about the Yanmar. I've never heard of 3 valves like that.
Really?
Is that so that if you have a real problem, you can start it firing on one cylinder, and after that's firing, then put the compression back on the other two?
I think that's not a good idea, is let it run for any length of time with 2 of those open. I don't think it's a good idea.
So why 3 valves?
Huh?
Why 3 valves?
I think when I was reading about it, I heard that you open all 3 of them, and then when you start cranking, supposedly 2 of them would close by themselves, and you close the last one when you want it to start. But Charms doesn't act like that. But that's what I read. Is that kind of is like what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Where you open all 3 to release because they're individual on each cylinder.
Right.
You need them if you want to spin the engine. You got to do that. But I think what I said will work. If they close by themselves and you close the last one, that'll work. But I think I read somewhere else about don't let it run with any of those open for any length of time.
Okay.
But anyway, I'll just be cautious about that. Or read up on it for me. Oh yeah, paddle wheel speed temperature. Yeah, when you're going, a boat's doing 7 knots and your speed gauge says you're going 0. Or you're going 7 knots and speed gauge says you're going 3. It's like, well, and that's what I found on Charms. Most of our boats have a speed transducer in the water. Sorella doesn't. I think the rest of them do. Basically, they call it the paddle wheel, right? Like a little paddle wheel. It's in the water. in the water. So the boat's moving, it's spinning that paddle wheel. There's magnets in the paddle wheel, and the little Hall effect sensor picks up the signal, sends it to your speed gauge, sees how fast it's rotating, and converts that to speed. So anyway, one time charm stopped working, and there's why. I pulled it up, and oh, look at that. And I mentioned, besides that stuff on there, I had some little critters crawling out of there too. So there was a little home nest in there for whatever was growing in there. And what I had to do on that one was I serviced it. I pushed the stainless steel pin out so I could remove the rotor. Just got the pin, the rotor, O-rings on here. I cleaned all the rotor off, cleaned all the crap out from inside the body. If the shaft is corroded, it probably should be replaced, so this is going to keep giving you resistance for that thing spinning on it. In some cases, it's only been the shaft corroded causing the problem, and we had to replace the shaft. But anyway, this is something that happens over time on all of our boats, because these things are always in the water. Especially when a boat sits for a very long time, like Sorella did. What does hers look like?
It doesn't have one.
That's why. Thank you. Even when Mark III sat for a long time. Anyway, yeah. But something we should be checking anyway. I do all the time, because this has happened twice on her already. I've only had her for a year and a half.
It's a great science.
Yeah. All right. Engine alarms are going on. All right. Now, as I said before about the lights, when the engine alarm buzzer goes on, see which light is lit on the panel. That tells you which alarm has been triggered. Also, usually the pulse tone that we all hear, we turn the key on, and that's the oil pressure alarm going off saying, hey, ignition's on, and I got no oil pressure. And then you start it, and it goes off, hopefully, right? The constant tone that we all hope we never hear is the over temperature alarm. Or now, also, I decided to hook my raw water alarm to the same one. So if the raw water alarm goes off, it's also going to give you the constant tone. So right now on Charm or Mark III, who have them, when you turn the key on, you get constant. And you're going to see low raw water light and low oil pressure lights are both on because they both have no flow. You start them up, they get raw water flow, oil pressure, they both go off. What to do if they go on? All right, oil pressure alarm. If the boat, I would say if the boat has an oil pressure gauge, check that first because it should be about 40 psi or so, I think, roughly. If it's zero, obviously you got no oil pressure. Shut down the engine right away anyway. All you can really do is check the oil level. If it's low, if that's what's causing the problem, you can fill it and see if that solves the problem. Otherwise, it's probably the oil pump, which you can't do anything about. You got to call for a tow. If you're out there and you got no oil pressure, what are you going to do? But you can't. But there's no way we can tell. If you have oil and you have no oil pressure, well, according to the sensor.
No, I'm saying the sensor's bad.
Oh, sail. Oh yeah, but we have no way. Generally, we have no way of knowing that. Yeah.
You check the oil and it's okay, and you say, okay, I'll do something else.
Well, yeah, but you don't want to run the engine.
No.
Thank you. Don't run the engine. If the over temperature alarm goes off, well, what I say is first, what does the temp gauge say? Is there any water flowing out the back? Shut it down. And then, you got to shut it down. Can't run the engine with the alarm. Oh, by the way, over temperature alarm. Those sensors, they're a switch. You have the temperature gauge on a sender. The over temperature switch doesn't go off until the boat's hit 205 degrees. To me, that engine's already overheated and possibly already damaged when those things go off. I don't know why they're that high, but I tested them all. That's where they go off at. That's where they're supposed to go off at. Yeah. That's just really hot. I mean, you can't run the engine. You can't keep running the engine if it's that hot. Well, yeah, you can, but we're going to damage the engine if it isn't already damaged. Shut down. You can't run the engine because it goes off at 205. Damage may already have been done, and it will occur if you run it anymore. If you check the water flow and you said there was no water flow, if you saw that, no water flow, then check the raw water flow alarm instructions next. Alright, if it was a raw water flow alarm, shutting down the engine right away may allow recently sucked in items like plastic bags, seaweed that you just ran across or whatever. If you shut down right away, they can just flow back out on their own. Please. And not block the, yeah, like I say, not block, anyway. Then, after shutting down, if you want to check that, what I would do is, I would go down, I would close the through hole, and now I need my, on the water strainer, water strainer. Fill the water strainer.
This is where the snorkel comes in here.
Actually, that's on there. Yeah, water strainer, okay? Close the through hole, remove this, the strainer bowl, open the through hole. If water flows in perfectly freely, then you know there's nothing blocking your through hole, right? And water should come in pretty fast, okay? If it's just trickling in, you probably got a clog, right?
It means you're sinking.
Huh? Yeah.
It means you're sinking.
And I said, if water does not flow in freely or is clogged, the only thing I can think of you could do is one of two things. One, I have a hose here. I could do this and go. I can try to blow that bag, seaweed, whatever it is, back out. And it'll work if it's there. That's one idea. If you happen to have one of these.
You could sneak it too, right?
Probably not, because this has to go up here, make an immediate right angle to a fitting, and then it's going through this hose, and it's going like this. Watch. It's going into this through hole thing and going another right angle. You'd have a hell of a time snaking that.
Yeah, it doesn't really, yeah.
So,
Really go through.
the other thing is, unfortunately, if water does not flow freely, you can try to blow it out. You can also use goggles and dive under the boat and clear the debris by hand. And we've put goggles and fins on all of our boats. And this is actually the only reason for putting them on there, other than having fun.
Get something in the product.
If you cannot, but if you cannot clear the clog, then you're going to need to get towed, because you've got no water coming to your engine. You have no choice. If there's no clog at the through hole inlet, now, maybe it cleared, right? Close the through hole. Try restarting the engine, and now if the water flow alarm does not go off, you should be fine. Okay, you should clear. But please just watch the engine temp. Just make sure while you're running. If the alarm goes on or the engine temp rises, you gotta shut down. Other possible causes are raw water flow, because the water pump is not turning. We talked about that earlier. The impeller's damaged. Check and replace. If the raw water alarm continues to sound with the engine running, you need to shut down the engine. You consider getting towed. The only thing I can say I'm offering is, if necessary or for safety reasons, like you're about to hit something, I would run the engine at very low RPM, watching that engine temperature. Okay? Because again, we don't want getting up to 200 degrees. I don't want getting to 190 degrees. So if you have to, low RPM, get to safety, head toward the dock, or watching that temperature. But if that engine temperature exceeds 190, you gotta shut it down, because you're gonna damage the engine. That's the only things that I can offer for how to, if this happens, what you can do out there. Hopefully one of these works. If it's raw water flow problem. And besides,
What happens if you pick up a trout?
Besides Scott, well, that's not going to plug up a through hole.
You know, we've had boats drag.
Well, no, that's snagging something on your. In that case, it was on the rudder, wasn't it? I think it was on the rudder.
It could be on the rudder. It could be on
because
the
it was a floating line. Well, when it gets in the prop, you have a new problem, because that's going to cause significant drag on your shaft, if not stop it because it's on the prop. Now it can't turn, and your engine can't run.
So you should shut off the engine if you're pulling a trout.
Well, yeah, but like I said, when Sorella actually drug in traps once. Remember that? But they were tangled in her rudder, not on her prop, because they brought them in, right? And I don't even know if they knew, and I don't know how they didn't know when those lines, when they were wrapped around her rudder,
Yeah.
and they didn't know.
They put them in lines just outside the breakwater.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
yeah. Lots of traps.
That's what we had, gang.